My great kingdom of Italy. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1. Origin is important. The bright sunshine shines through the windows, making it look particularly bright. The slight coolness brought by the breeze makes people feel so comfortable, which makes people feel sleepy. Peng Gang looked at the charming scenery outside the window and was filled with emotion. Who would have thought that a keyboard warrior would turn into a prince? Such a change in identity caught him off guard. He still remembers that because he was arguing too fiercely with others online, he accidentally shook the water glass, causing a leakage of electricity, and he fell on the keyboard. As a result, as soon as he opened his eyes, he was called His Highness, with a surprised expression. I still remember learning that I was in the Quirinal Palace in Rome, and that I was inexplicably Prince Carlo, who fainted from grief due to the death of his grandfather Emmanuel II, the father of the Kingdom of Italy. After spending the first few days, Peng Gang gradually accepted his identity as a prince. After all, this identity was far different from his previous life, and he was not treated badly at all. Of course, he also made a lot of jokes because of some of the habits of later generations, but fortunately they were just minor problems. However, he learned his lesson and spent more time watching and learning. For this reason, Peng Gang showed the perseverance before the college entrance examination to prevent himself from being discovered as a counterfeit. The result was pretty good. So far he had been undetected, which gave him nothing but a reputation for taciturnity. During this time, he also gradually understood the era in which he lived. At present, all European countries are in a state of barbaric growth, and countries are exploiting every opportunity to plunder for their own interests. The same is true among the people. There are all sorts of deceptions and deceptions. Of course, he got these from the newspapers, not what he saw with his own eyes. Having said that, at the age of 14 or 15, it was impossible for him to personally understand the public sentiment, so newspapers became his main window to understand this era. After staying at the window for a while, he felt his body was a little warm. Peng Gang picked up the lemonade with ice and took a sip. It was wonderful to be able to drink ice water in the early summer of 1880. The corrupt royal life is so intoxicating that one has completely forgotten the idea of being a revolutionary successor for many years. If Peng Gang is still dissatisfied with this time travel, it must be a matter of time, because he is not very familiar with the history of this era. To be more precise, in his previous life, his quarrels with people were either during World War I or World War II, or during the war. At most, they were discussed before World War I, which was basically after 1900. If we push forward, it is basically the Franco-Prussian War. As for what we know about Italy, we only know that it is a lucky country. For example, from the beginning, Emmanuel II, the King of Sardinia, relied on the help of France to defeat Austria and capture northern Italy. Later, relying on Garibaldi, southern Italy was sent, and at this time Italy finally reached basic unification, and his grandfather Emmanuel II was also declared King of Italy. Later, he used the Austro-Prussian War to capture Venice, and relied on the Franco-Prussian War to capture the Papal States protected by France, so it is not surprising at all to be called lucky. There is a saying that the but determines the head. Peng Gang thinks it is very correct. I remember that in my previous life, I was gnashing my teeth at the evil capitalists, and even ridiculing the mascot-like royal families in Europe. It fully embodies the eloquence of an outstanding revolutionary successor. Although the probability of him wanting to succeed is 1 in a billion, he is not wrong to say a word about successor, but now as a prince, he hates those crooked ideas. How can this teach the kind-hearted Italian people? If the current relationship between the kingdom and the Pope was not on the verge of war, he would even want to ask this Spokesperson of the Kingdom of Heaven to preach to the world for a while, to cleanse his gradually tainted soul. Since others cannot be relied upon now, you can only rely on yourself. The great leader once said that you can have enough food and clothing by yourself, and Peng Gang plans to practice it. To this end, He obtained a lot of information about Italy from his father, Umberto I. After some understanding, he had to admit that it was not easy at all to make Italy love the royal family point, because Italy currently has the problem of too many people and too little land. Many people cannot bear such poverty and go overseas to develop in other countries, and the direction they go to is basically the American continent point. In fact, the more important thing is that Italy is still an agricultural country, and Italy's geographical environment is only suitable for a small farmer economy point. After understanding this, he deeply realized that in order for Italy to develop and grow, and for the people to live a good life, industrialization must be developed point. However, if Italy wants to industrialize, it has a very embarrassing problem, and that is a lack of coal and iron mines in the country. In this era, industrialization first requires heavy industry, based on coal and iron, and this is Italy's shortcoming point. In fact, the Italian government also knows this, and has conducted large-scale geological surveys in the kingdom for this purpose. The results were very touching. Many stones and minerals were discovered, but the most important large-scale coal and iron mines were not found. Peng Gang's data from later generations also revealed this. At that time, exploration technology was already very advanced, but there were still no large coal and iron mines in Italy. How to develop heavy industry without coal and iron mines, although it can barely pretend to be an industrial country. By relying on light industry, it is like a house made of paper that will fall apart as soon as it is poked. This is also where Peng Gang feels dissatisfied. Although he has a distinguished status as a prince, Italy's chronic problem of insufficient potential gives him a headache. Although there is currently no better way out for Italy, life still has to go by. His Royal Highness Carlo, who has been corrupted a lot by the sugar-coated bullets of capitalism, can no longer live without such a life. He is really degenerate. Feeling a little tired from standing, Carlo lay on the calfskin sofa and continued to plan for Italy's future. In fact, it's not that he has no solution at all. He already has some ideas. For this purpose, he has sent his confidant Domingo to take care of it. This is Carlo's new confidant, mainly used when it is inconvenient for him. At that time, Carlo saw that the attendant was honest and reliable, and decided to subdue him to do some things for him. My confidant should be in Prague now. Thinking of this, Carlo felt a little fuzzy, and the too comfortable environment made people want to doze off. Crunch. Just as he was thinking about it, there was a sound of pushing the door open, followed by a sound that made him feel heartbroken. Your Highness, I will clean the room. Peng Gang knew who was coming without even looking up, because he was so familiar with the voice. It was the maid who cleaned his room. Naya, come in. As he spoke, a youthful girl in her 20s, dressed as a maid, walked in carrying a bucket. Its smaller body is carrying a wooden barrel, which looks so uncoordinated, no matter how you look at it. After the maid came in, Carlo's breathing became obviously faster and thicker. In his heart, he couldn't help scolding himself. He was really worthless. Why was he still like this? He had never seen a woman like him. I remember that the famous philosopher Mr. Wang Jing's proposed a great true fragrance theory, and Carlo was obviously a supporter of this theory. Although he did not admit it in his heart, his body supported this theory. Speaking of which, it's not his fault. The maid named Naya is petite and cute, with delicate skin and delicate facial features. She doesn't look like a European maid at all. In addition, the size of the European style has a Japanese maid style, which is very suitable for Caffarello. There is some fatal temptation. It's so hot out here. Carlo couldn't help but unbutton the 2 buttons of his shirt to let the heat dissipate, and at the same time, he drank his glass of ice water in one gulp. It's a little too hot in the room. I'll go out for a walk. After leaving a sentence, Carlo left here, as if he was running away, leaving only Naya's innocent eyes. Chapter 2. A bad start. Although it was pleasant to watch the maid Naya clean up, it was not good to watch too much. It would make his heart beat faster and his breathing speed up, which made him feel like he had a nosebleed. Sometimes I wonder, since nylon was not invented in this era, why does it have such great charm that it makes me lose? Forget it. Don't think about it so much. Let's go to another place to calm down. Carlo, who was forced to leave his room, planned to play a game of chess with his brother. I forgot to mention one more thing. Carlo's brother Prince Vittorio is 2 years younger than him and is currently in a rebellious state. Carlo, as a person who has been there, naturally understands this very well. For Vittorio, whose aura gradually filled the air, Carlo was able to capture him easily. As expected, Carlo's arrival was warmly welcomed by his younger brother. Carlo, it's you. Vittorio, whose breath of greenery could not be suppressed, greeted his brother cordially. However, his fighting eyes did not reveal much affection. It's not Vittorio's fault. It would be the same for anyone who took his pocket money one after another. Although he took it out himself, how could he be willing to do so? That's right. Carlo even defrauded his own brother of his pocket money. But it's not his fault, because his younger brother Vittorio was a little rich man. At that time, he was fascinated by money and couldn't help but transfer it to himself. Although he regretted it afterwards, he couldn't help but later several times. In fact, this can't be entirely blamed on him. Vittorio's monthly pocket money is 20,000 lire, and he currently uses it sparingly, so he has naturally accumulated a lot of money, and Carlo happened to have a plan to spend money. Naturally, he turned his attention to his cute brother. Vittorio, did you miss me? Carlo went up and killed him with a slap on the head, completely ignoring the anger in Victor's eyes. You are not allowed to touch my head again. Okay, I won't touch it anymore. Looking at Vittorio, who was about to explode, Carlo put down his hand with a victorious smile, which naturally caused Vittorio's anger level to rise sharply. Once this person becomes angry, his rationality plummets, and taking advantage of this opportunity, Carlo naturally strikes while the iron is hot. How about we play a game with a chance of winning something? Just come. Faced with Carlo's invitation to fight, Vittorio agreed without hesitation. After a while, Carlo left with a victorious smile, leaving only his brother's frustrated expression. Carlo was very satisfied when he put the trophies he won back into his small vault and looked at the neatly stacked banknotes. The first fund needed for the plan is enough now. As long as the results are achieved, people will see the benefits, and then follow-up funds will be easy to handle. Today is truly a perfect day. With such a good mood, Carlo waited until a piece of news came, which immediately made his mood not perfect. You said Tesla is unwilling to come to Italy. Seeing Carlo's unbelieving expression, Domingo, the newly appointed confidant, could only bite the bullet and nod. This is going to be difficult. Yes, this news disrupted Carlo's plans. Tesla was a key figure in his plan. For the inventor of alternating current, Carlo never thought that he had a reason to refuse. Yes, electrification is what Carlo wants to start, and Tesla is at the center of it. The second industrial revolution is very important to Italy. It is also one of the few opportunities for Italy to overtake in corners, and Domingo actually brought him such news, and he threw the water glass in his hand at him on the spot. It was considered that Carlo had good cultivation skills. Seeing Carlo's expression of wanting to eat someone, Domingo felt a little regretful. It was not that he regretted the next task, but that he regretted not kneeling down to beg Mr. Tesla. He never expected that Mr. Tesla would be so valued by the prince. And from my previous experience, I didn't find anything unique about this person that made the prince value him so much. But now the regret medicine is no longer available, so I can only wait for his highness's punishment. Looking at Domingo, who looked like a dead father, Carlo controlled his impulse, calmed down and asked, then, tell me how this Tesla rejected you. Carlo's mind was now filled with questions about why Tesla would say no, so he wanted to know why. Your Highness, Mr. Tesla couldn't believe it when he heard that His Highness invited him to come to Italy to serve as the director of the Electric Power Research Institute. He said that he was not knowledgeable enough to take on such an important task, so he planned to study for a while before coming back. After hearing Domingo's explanation, Carlo didn't know what to say. But now that Tesla has said no, it needs someone new. But this thing is not like Chinese cabbage, so he can choose whatever he wants. Although Carlo knew about alternating current was just a term here, and he did not have the actual manufacturing ability. And he didn't know that he would travel through time, and he didn't prepare any information. So, now that he is blind, what should he do with the Electric Power Research Institute he prepared? Thinking of this, the money I took from my brother today is no longer good. What should I do next? Carlo, who was full of worries, sent the frustrated Domingo away, but he thought about it all afternoon and couldn't figure it out. Even the little maid didn't smell good. In this mood he waited until dinner came, pointing Christian teachings. The supper is sacred, and Jesus ascended to heaven after eating the Last Supper. Therefore, it can be seen that Europe attaches great importance to dinner, and the Italian royal family is no exception. When dinner came, the family sat neatly at the dining table. The servants served a sumptuous dinner, and his father, Umberto I, sat at the head seat, but his slightly tired eyes showed that he had been very tired recently. There was no way. After all, he had only been on the throne for a year, and had many government affairs that needed to be handled by him. It was normal for him to be a little confused at the beginning. Sitting next to him was his mother, Queen Margherita. The passion between the two of them had been tempered by many years of life. It was impossible for them to treat each other as if they were guests, but it did not reach the point where they were inseparable. They could be regarded as between two things. Below are the two princes, Carlo and Vittorio. Although Carlo was upset by Tesla's rejection, how could he show it at this time? Of course, he looked very happy. However, compared with Carlo, Vittorio was far behind. He stared at Carlo with an expression of bitterness and hatred. Facing his younger brother who couldn't cultivate enough, Carlo couldn't help but tease him with his eyes again, just in time to vent his depressed mood today. What are you looking at me for? Give me the money. Why should you pay back what you won based on your own ability? You still haven't paid it back. Don't even think about it. Wait for me. Bypassing the two princes who were looking at each other, next were the two sisters, Princess Yolanda and Princess Mafalda. However, compared with the two princes who were communicating cordially, they were much simpler. They were sitting quietly on the chair with their eyes wide open, waiting for their meal. Taking advantage of the time before eating, Umberto, a father, spoke. I'm going to Sicily for an inspection next. Carlo, Vittorio, you must listen to your mother and don't cause trouble. Obviously, the exchange of eyes between the two made his father notice. Umberto, are you going to Sicily for an inspection? Before the two of them could answer, Queen Margherita, the wife, spoke. Yes, this is a common thought between the Prime Minister and I at present. I have never been to Sicily and Sardinia in the whole country, and I cannot favor one over the other. Facing his wife's question, his father Umberto sounded a little apologetic. Over the past year, he has spent too much time on military and political affairs, and in order to better understand the actual situation in various places, he has visited everywhere, leaving much less time for his family. Father, how long do you need to inspect this time? At this time, his younger brother Vittorio couldn't help but interrupt and ask, it will probably take about 10 days, father. Umberto's words gave Vittorio a different look in his eyes. Vittorio, don't hear anything bad said about you when I come back. After his father saw the signs on the spot, he immediately gave a warning and his thoughts disappeared. Seeing his brother being scolded, Carlo hurriedly stepped forward to add something. Father, please don't worry, I will watch over my brother. Yeah, but Carlo's words successfully attracted his father's attention. But this made Vittorio's fire rise again, for which he secretly glared at Carlo. Of course, Carlo, who was in a better mood and didn't have the knowledge of a little kid, wouldn't take this to heart. This is where the life-filled dinner begins. The next day, my father left Rome for Sicily under the protection of the captain of the guard, Felicius. Chapter 3 Early Warning. The father's departure did not allow the two to herd sheep, because they still had a lot of homework and military work to learn. In terms of homework, Carlo was not worried at all. The intensity of study in later generations would allow him to do it with ease, but in terms of military affairs, he could only grit his teeth and persevere, especially the riding skills, which were even more torture for Carlo. Yes, as a prince, Carlo had to learn to ride a horse. In fact, he was not the only one. Nowadays, there is no male noble in Europe who does not learn to ride. This is also an important part of military skills. Your Highness Carlo, relax, don't be afraid. Sarah is a very docile mare and she won't move around. On a small horse farm in the palace, Captain Conti, a royal riding instructor, was teaching Carlo equestrian training. because he was wearing a riding suit and was tensing up, holding on to the reins with both hands, as if he was afraid of falling. His embarrassment naturally attracted ridicule from his younger brother Vittorio, but he didn't mock him with words. He trotted past him on horseback with a high-spirited look, and even raised his chin at him intentionally. His brother's behavior made Carlo feel a little sad. This was really retribution, and it came so quickly. How could anyone control a horse skillfully if he had never even touched a horse's hair in his previous life? Even if it is a docile mare, it is the same. It depends on whether the horse wants to bite when it opens its mouth. Your Highness Carlo, please stop holding on to the reins. Sarah feels very uncomfortable. Captain Conti, an instructor, quickly pointed out his mistake. Hearing the riding instructor's words made Carlo feel even more nervous. Who I am? Where am I? What am I doing? Now he had no choice but to bite the bullet and continue to hone his riding skills. Instructor Conti, who trained his riding skills, also taught very patiently. Speaking of this, Captain Conti is not simple at all. He protected his father Umberto I from safely evacuating during the Battle of Custoza, so he was valued by him. It's just that, although Captain Conti is loyal, he is not very capable and can only do some protection work. He is also assigned the task of teaching the two princes how to ride. Compared with his own poor equestrian skills, his younger brother Vittorio's equestrian skills are very good and even received praise from Captain Kant. Your Highness Vittorio, you ride very well. You will definitely be an excellent equestrian in the future. The praise from Captain Conti made him like a proud peacock, frequently showing off all kinds of fancy things to Carlo. Carlo didn't pay much attention to his brother's childish behavior. When Victor has pocket money next month, let him know how powerful his brother is. The riding practice basically lasted all afternoon. After the sun set in the west, Carlo, who was exhausted from the practice, and Vittorio, who was not yet having fun, returned to the Quirinal Palace. After they returned to the palace, they saw a tall and handsome man talking to their mother as soon as they entered the door. This was a visit from their uncle Amedia. The two of them greeted each other in unison. "Hello, uncle." "Hello." Two little princes faced with the greetings of Carlo and Vittorio. Amedia responded enthusiastically. Speaking of which, this uncle's experience is also extremely rich. Uncle Amedia became king early on, before his father Umberto. At that time, there was a coup in Spain. General Juan Prim, who led the coup, planned to choose a king for Spain. The person chosen at that time was Prince Leopold of the Hohenzollern family. This proposal was strongly opposed by France and became the trigger for the Franco-Prussian War. Then he chose his uncle, Amedia, Duke of Aosta, as king. Faced with the title of king falling from the sky, Amedia naturally would not give up, so he ran away to become the king of Spain. It's just that he was unlucky. Juan Prim, who was still urging him to become king, was assassinated on the way. As a result, the first thing he did when he arrived in Spain was the funeral of Prim, who was assassinated. Therefore, his position in Spain was extremely embarrassing. He had no supporters and became a king in name only. After 3 uninteresting years as king, the Spanish parliament deposed him and overwhelmingly declared a republic. A year later, Isabella's son Alfonso XII was welcomed back, and the Bourbon dynasty was restored. After Amedia stepped down from the embarrassing Spanish throne, he returned to Italy with ease and became the Duke of Aosta again. However, Amedio, the Duke of Aosta, lives in Turin all year round and usually does not come to Rome. I don't know why he came to Rome this time. Of course, this is beyond Carlo's control at the moment. "Uncle Amedia, what did you bring for us this time?" As the younger brother, Vittorio was not polite at all and asked about the gift. Facing Victor's words, Uncle Amedia smiled, touched his head and replied, "Victor, my uncle has nothing to bring you this time. You must know that Turin is not rich either." Hearing his uncle's words, Victor couldn't help but hold his mouth shut, but the words from his mother made him immediately change his attitude. "Vittorio, why are you talking to your uncle? Didn't I teach you manners?" Following his mother, Queen Margherita's dissatisfied words, Victor's expression immediately changed. He immediately changed from a look of disgust to a very enthusiastic one. "I'm glad uncle came to visit, Carlo. was naturally not as idiotic as Victor, and he politely said welcome words. Carlo, I haven't seen you for a year and I didn't expect you to be much more polite now. As the uncle said this, he came up with a slap on the head, causing black lines to appear in the corners of Carlo's eyes. Haha, our Carlo is actually shy. This is not shy. Okay. Facing his rough uncle, Carlo looked hopeless, which made his uncle and mother laugh. Go and change your clothes quickly. I can smell the sweat from afar, the mother said as if she was trying to get out of trouble, and also took advantage of the situation to fan her nose and mouth with her hand, as if there was a strange smell. This move naturally caused the two of them to run back to the room quickly. After seeing the two children leaving, Margherita, the queen, spoke. Your brother is still in Sicily for inspection, and will not be back until 2 days later. If you are in an emergency, you can go directly to Sicily to find him. It doesn't matter, I can wait for my brother to come back. The words of her brother-in-law made Margherita, the queen, feel relieved. It seemed that this visit was indeed not an important matter. If it's something important, just send a telegram directly. Media was indeed fine. He just received news that there were extreme anarchists who would be harmful to his brother. This made him feel uneasy, so he planned to inform his brother. It needs to be explained here that in Europe of this era, all kinds of ideas are simply a chaos of demons. The fierce collision between various new demands for democracy and social reality gave rise to many political ideas. Among the anarchists, the core of anarchism is to enhance personal freedom and abolish government authorities and all government management agencies. In this era, anarchists were most fond of encouraging political violence, such as bombings and assassinating heads of state. This type of action is often called propaganda of the deed. The original meaning of the word refers to demonstration of direct action, to inspire the masses to revolution. However, action propaganda can be violent or non-violent. It was clear that this time the anarchists were targeting King Umberto. Since someone wants to assassinate his brother, he should be informed quickly. It's a pity that a media has not confirmed this news. It is impossible for him to tell his brother with unconfirmed news. Be careful, someone may want to assassinate you. And this kind of situation can be seen everywhere in Europe. European monarchs in the 19th century were not safe at all. There were not too many people who wanted to assassinate them to make big news. This is also a sequely caused by the explosion of ideas. Although the lineage theory is still the mainstream in Europe, its resistance is not small at all, and the leaders are basically children of the nobles. It can be said that the enemies come from within. Medio, who had not seen his brother, could only wait until next time. The Duke of Aosta returned to Turin the next day. Chapter 4 Assassination. Palermo gradually recovered in the early morning. In Sicily's largest city, buildings of various styles can be seen everywhere. There are both the mainstream European Baroque style and Arabic and other styles. The buildings of various styles are intertwined, giving Palermo a unique flavor. Ding, ding ding. The ringing of the alarm clock woke up the sleeping Gabrielsi, and he stretched out his hand to interrupt the alarm reminder. The hard bed made Gabrielsi not sleep well, but he was still satisfied with it. After getting up, Gabrielsi stood in the mirror and looked at his own image and couldn't help but frown. Messy hair and a scraggy beard don't look good at all and need to be taken care of. After washing his face, Gabrielsi took a comb and dipped it in water to comb his hair, then used a razor to hang up his beard. Gabrielsi did all this very seriously, as if it was the most important thing to him. After taking care of himself, he took out his best clothes and put them on. From all aspects, he looked like he was going to a banquet, but then he took out a pistol from the box he was carrying. Judging from the inscription on the gun body, this is a Colt revolver. Yes, this is the more famous M1873 single-action revolver, and it is the sheriff's type with the shortest gun body. The barrel of the gun is only 89mm long, which is very suitable for hiding in clothes, and this is what he values most. That's right, Gabrielsi plans to do a big thing today, and he has already made everyone remember his business, and this gun is what he relies on. Gabrielsi's background was not bad at all. His father was originally a businessman, so he was able to provide for him to go to school. Gabrielsi was exposed to anarchism in college, and he was very sympathetic to it. Moreover, he believes that the government is just a blood-sucking insect on the people and has no effect at all. So after attending college, he plunged headlong into the embrace of anarchism and publicly advocated anarchist ideas many times. If Tate didn't have a relatively rich father, he would have been arrested by the police long ago. But even with his father's protection, no one believed what he preached. Faced with this situation, the idea of making big news and attracting people's attention was born. Do something big that will shock the world and make people pay attention to your opinions. There was nothing more shocking to the world than the assassination of monarch. The one he chose was the new King Umberto I. So these days he was preparing weapons and assassination plans while paying attention to the king's movements. Fortunately, the new king had only been on board for about a year, and he often inspected everywhere. He was also the focus of newspaper reports, so he avoided a lot of trouble. On the wall of the bathroom, there is also a photo of Umberto I cut out from a newspaper. After taking care of it, no one could tell that Gabriel C was an assassin, and he took off his hat with satisfaction and went out. Today will be a day worth remembering for the world. The Norman Palace in Palermo was built in 1100. It was originally a newly built royal palace by the Romans. Later, it was built by Byzantines and Arabs, and two different styles were added, making the palace even more exotic, so much so that it is even more exotic in Sicily. During the kingdom period, it was valued by the king of Sicily and became the king's residence. After the unification of Italy, it was taken over by the royal family and became the residence of the king when he arrived in Palermo. After Umberto visited Palermo, it was natural that he would stay here. Umberto, who is now the king, is also preparing to go out. Today he needs to go to the city hall to listen to Mayor Omer's city plan. At noon, he will have lunch with local celebrities. In the afternoon, he will have a parade with the people to let the people of Palermo. The people felt the kindness of the new king. Your Majesty, we are ready to go. The captain of the bodyguard, Baron Filmicki, walked into the room and reported to Umberto, who was reading the information. Okay, let's set off now. Putting away the documents in his hand, Umberto, wearing a formal dress, followed the captain of the guard and walked out. On the road inside the palace, several exquisite carriages with royal emblems were already waiting here, as were the cavalry guards responsible for security. After Umberto and his entourage boarded the carriage, the convoy slowly walked out under the command of the coachman. At this time, the guards' cavalry tightly protected the convoy and escorted His Majesty the King to the city hall. The motorcade leaving the Roman palace was driving on the street, and the streets were lined with people who wanted to see the king. The police had to block these people to prevent someone from suddenly disturbing the motorcade. Gabriel C did not blend in with the crowd because he secretly bought a copy of the king's itinerary. He would choose the right time and appear in the right place to give the king a fatal blow. Umberto, who had no idea that someone outside was thinking about him, was familiarizing himself with the information in his hand in the carriage. Although his eyes showed fatigue after many consecutive days of inspections, this was also his responsibility. He needed to understand today's work, especially the celebrities who had lunch with him at noon, which were related to the development of Palermo. He needed to understand these. People have full understanding. Although these things can be understood by the captain of the guard, and he can wait for the captain of the guard to give him a hint. For Umberto, being introduced by the captain of the guard has a different effect than speaking out himself, and it can bring closer the relationship with these celebrities. This is very important to the kingdom. When the motorcade arrived at the city hall, Menache was already waiting at the door with officials. Welcome to Palermo, Your Majesty. The mayor and his people came forward to greet Umberto, who got off the car. Thank you for the welcome ceremony, which impressed me deeply. Umberto said thanks casually, and then entered the city hall under the leadership of the mayor. After the king entered the city hall, the welcoming crowd dispersed, revealing the figure of Gabriel C. Yes, he is here, mainly to get familiar with his target, King Umberto. After all, his photo in the newspaper is too blurry. Only by seeing it with his own eyes can he ensure that there are no mistakes. Now that he saw his goal, Gabriel left with satisfaction, and he would not come back until the afternoon. The sun is gradually rising, and the heat it emits is already making people feel uncomfortable. But the crowd in Palermo was not affected at all. At noon, some people gathered in the town hall square. Some of them held the flag of the Kingdom of Italy, and some held the portrait of His Majesty the King. They were waiting for His Majesty with lights and colors of travel. Gabriel C was also among them, and in order to conceal his identity, he also held a flag of the Kingdom of Italy, and squeezed to the front. Even though his back was wet with sweat. He didn't have to wait long before the police came to maintain order. What made him even more delighted was that a white open carriage appeared at the city hall. It seemed that the target was about to appear, which made him even more excited. The same goes for the waiting crowd. They are also shouting excitedly to see the king. There was no waiting for long before Umberto appeared at the door, waving to the waiting crowd with a smile. Mayor Nash, please ride in the same car as me. Beside the carriage, King Umberto's words made His Excellency the Mayor ecstatic. Thank you very much, Your Majesty. The excited Mr. Mayor waited until King Umberto got on the bus, then sat down opposite the king excitedly, and also squeezed the captain of the guard to the other side, which made the captain of the guard, Baron Philmickey, frown slightly. But when he saw the mayor apologizing to him, he didn't say anything more about it. Afterwards, he regretted it very much. After everyone got on the bus, the parade began under the protection of the guard's cavalry. For the new king, the people of Palermo showed great enthusiasm and waved to salute the king. Facing the enthusiastic people, King Umberto also responded. Everything seemed so natural. Close. Gabriel C, who was in the crowd, watched the carriage approaching with great joy. On the way, he quietly lowered the flag and waited for the carriage to arrive. At this moment, he didn't feel excited to take action at all. Instead, he was extremely calm, so calm that he could still observe the movements of the target's fellow passengers. The person sitting opposite the king is the mayor of the city. He is waving to people with the target, and the person blocked by him should be a security guard, because he is looking around vigilantly. But because of the mayor's blocking, he saw some difficulties on his side. After the carriage arrived beside him, Gabriel C pretended to stumble due to excitement, and appeared on the road, as if he wanted to regain his balance. This move made the cavalry guarding the side stunned for a moment, and he took advantage of the cavalry's dazed moment to quickly take out his pistol. He was very proficient in this action, because he had practiced it thousands of times before. He knew that his time was limited, and he had to draw his gun and shoot in the shortest possible time. In this rare moment, he did the same. More importantly, the target in front of him turned his head to the other side, and knew nothing about his sudden assassin. There is no better opportunity than this, and God is helping you. Before anyone else could stop him, Gabriel C fired 3 shots at close range, hitting the king each time. The sudden shooting stunned the scene. Before Gabriel C could shoot again, the guards who reacted had already swarmed up and subdued him. It's just that the bloodstains on the king's body are so eye-catching. Chapter 5 Death. What? My father was assassinated. When Carlo learned the news from his mother, he was shocked. He was still a little confused when he saw his mother walking into his room with red eyes. He didn't expect such a result. How's the injury now? Carlo is very concerned about his father's injury. According to the Prime Minister, the telegram states that your father's injury is so serious that it will be difficult to transfer him to Rome for treatment. When his mother said this, she couldn't help but shed tears again, and Carlo's heart sank when he heard this, and it became difficult to move, which cast some bad psychological shadow on him. Looking at her son's performance, she thought he was worried about his father. Queen Margherita wiped her tears and continued, I don't want to believe this fact, but this is a telegram brought by the Prime Minister himself. Get ready, we will go to Palermo right away. Mother Ma left after saying these words. Next, he would tell his other children the news. God was so unfair to her. Why did her husband experience this? The king was assassinated, and the news was too shocking for Carlo. Although he has only been in this world for more than a year, and he rarely sees his father, because he is busy with state affairs, he basically checks in with them whenever he comes back, and he feels a strong sense of family affection from it. Humans are not vegetation, so how can they not have feelings? So slowly he concealed his identity from the beginning and gradually accepted his parents in this life. The news that his father was assassinated naturally surprised him. At the same time, he had a deeper understanding of Europe now. Kings are easy to be assassinated, and he can also see how chaotic Europe is now. But now he couldn't care about anything else. He was going to see how his father was injured first. Carlo quickly changed his clothes and rushed downstairs. Downstairs, my mother was talking to Prime Minister Carlo, seemingly talking about the itinerary. Carlo also noticed that the Prime Minister nodded to him as he walked down the stairs. The Prime Minister's behavior naturally attracted my mother's attention. Carlo, you came just in time. The Prime Minister has already prepared a ship to take us to Palermo as quickly as possible. After hearing his mother's words, Carlo said sincerely, "Thank you for your arrangement at this time. We will keep it in mind. It doesn't matter. This is what I should do. I'm also very sad about what happened to His Majesty, but I would like to ask the Queen to rush over as soon as possible." After the Prime Minister said what was most important now, he continued, "I have sent people to bring the best doctors and medical equipment. In addition, in order to pray for His Majesty, I also went to the priest. I hope that His Majesty is safe and well." Carlo's words also fully demonstrate his ability as Prime Minister to take all aspects into consideration in the face of emergencies. Queen Margherita was very grateful to hear that the Prime Minister had arranged for the best doctors and medical equipment. "Thank you, Prime Minister, for this arrangement. This is so important to my husband. Such an outstanding Prime Minister naturally makes my mother feel happy. In this situation, he really needs someone to help him come up with ideas." When she heard that her husband had been assassinated, she was in a panic and could only think about her injured husband. As for Carlo, he is a little at a loss now and can only comfort his grieving mother first. The fearless and confident attitude shown by those time-traveling seniors was not seen in him at all. Prime Minister Carlo was worthy of being chosen by his father Umberto, and he fully demonstrated his abilities at this time. 2 hours later, when the carriage arrived at Antium, the port closest to Rome, a large number of people were already waiting here, such as Interior Minister Judley, Minister of Health and Education Mitchell David, and others. It can be said that in addition to maintaining the operation of the government, most of the senior military and political officials are here. Carlo was not familiar with these people, so he could only listen to the Prime Minister's introduction and say hello to these people one by one. And this also gave him a bad feeling. It was too early. But now he can't care about this, and his priority is to appease his family. At present, except for myself, my other brothers and sisters all have tears in their eyes after crying. Of course, everyone now knew what the important matter was, and no one dared to waste time. After boarding the ship, the group immediately rushed to Palermo. The Azalea is a high-speed cargo ship with a displacement of 3,000 tons. It usually transports high-value goods, but I never imagined that it would suddenly become a passenger ship. But who made it the fastest ship in the port currently, reaching a high speed of 14 knots per hour. However, there are still a lot of goods on this ship that have not been removed, and people can tell at a glance that it is a cargo ship. It's just that no one cares about it now. Even the most sophisticated people don't have any dissatisfaction. 2 days later in the evening, the rhododendron docked at the port of Palermo, and the person responsible for welcoming it was Mayor Nush. Speaking of which, the mayor was also pitiful. He let an assassin assassinate the king under his eyes. The moment the king was shot, he knew that he was finished. But even if he is dead, he still has to stand on the last duty. This is not because of his conscience, but because he hopes to make amends in his next action. So, after receiving the telegram that the royal family and senior officials were coming, he immediately arranged for people to clean the port carefully, and at the same time, called in the police to provide the highest level of vigilance. If there was another assassination, let alone he was finished, it is estimated that his family no need to run. It's just that all these actions of his were a blind man's wasted effort. The people who got off the Azalea all had tired faces, and everyone had expressions of wanting to rest. However, if you think about it, you will know that the Azalea is a high-speed cargo ship. How comfortable can it be to ride on it? Even the royal family, who are in the best position, have tired eyes in their eyes. However, they cannot rest now. They must follow the royal family to the hospital to check on His Majesty's safety point, so after the group boarded the carriage, they immediately rushed to the hospital point. San Siro Hospital is the best hospital in Palermo, but this best hospital has been strictly protected since His Majesty Umberto was sent here. Point as the captain of the bodyguard, Baron Felicimacchi worked tirelessly to guard the seriously injured king. His eyes were filled with regret for himself. It was all his own fault that allowed His Majesty to be assassinated. Point he had already known the news that the Queen was coming today, but now he didn't want to leave the ward at all. He was heartbroken at the moment the king was assassinated. Point with a bang, the door to the ward was opened, and a tired queen walked into the room with several princes and princesses. Queen Felicity did not forget his duty and went up to the queen with apologetic greetings. The queen was surprised by the appearance of Felicimacchi. His face was pale, his eyes were bloodshot with thick dark circles, and the stench on his body could not be dissipated for a long time. Your Majesty, Baron, you don't have to blame yourself so much for this. This is all God's arrangement. His mother, a queen, stepped forward to comfort the captain of the guard who suffered a huge blow. Thank you, Queen, for being tolerant to me, but I'm very aware of my fault. I'm very sorry that I failed to protect your Majesty. In the end, the captain of the guard, who paid the most attention to appearance, cried like a child, which made everyone else want to forgive the captain of the guard. Point the sound in the ward woke up the father in the hospital bed. Yes, Madder, my father's voice made my mother stop comforting the captain of the guard and immediately walked up to the hospital bed. It was me. When I heard the news that you were attacked, I rushed over immediately. Are you okay? Umberto raised his hand with difficulty and replied with a smile. How could this be okay? I almost thought I was going to see God right away. My father's jokes didn't make my mother laugh. Carlo, where is my little Carlo? Faced with his father's sudden call, Carlo quickly walked to his side. Father, I'm here. Seeing Carlo coming out in front of him, his father stretched out his hand to touch his face with difficulty. Carlo saw his father's struggling feeling and quickly put his hand on his cheek. Carlo, you have to promise me to take good care of my brothers and sisters. Okay, no problem, father. I will take good care of my younger brothers and sisters. Feeling that his father was about to give his last words, Carlo immediately accepted the words and agreed. Caroli, hearing his father calling the Prime Minister, the captain of the guard, who had recovered a little, immediately called the Prime Minister in. His Majesty, when the Prime Minister walked to the bedside and saw the state of the kingdom, his heart skipped a beat. Prime Minister, I have felt the call of the Lord, but before I leave, I hope you can protect Carlo until he reaches adulthood. Okay, Your Majesty, please rest assured, I will definitely protect His Highness Carlo. After feeling everything explained, my father said to himself, it's a pity that I didn't get to see Amelia. Otherwise, I would have wanted to talk to him. It's a pity, but that's enough for now. I didn't expect that I would end my life in this way. I hope that future generations will not have any objections to me. A good evaluation. On April 21st, 1880, Umberto I, King of Italy, passed away at the San Siro Hospital in Palermo. Although he only took the throne for more than a year, he still left a valuable legacy to Italy. Chapter 6 Funeral. The death of Umberto I shocked the whole world. The result made many people feel incredible that such a king was actually killed by an assassin without a heel point. But compared to other countries, Italy is more sad. Many people did not expect that their monarch would disappear like this. So when King Umberto was sent out from the hospital, people stood on the street to see him off, and the scene was solemn and solemn. Point as for the royal family, they were all sitting in the carriage with red eyes. It would take them some time to adapt to this result. Point as for the Prime Minister, he is busy preparing for what comes next. There are a lot of things waiting for him to deal with after the death of the king, not to mention the funeral. Next, the new king will ascend the throne, and there are more important divisions of power, which will keep him busy. Point in addition, the next king has been determined, and as the eldest son, Carlo is the best choice. because on his hospital bed, Umberto had already determined that it was impossible to be overturned and re-elected in front of so many people. But it is a pity that, even if Carlo becomes king, he will have very little power, because his power is basically divided between the prime minister and the regent, Uncle Amedia, and he does not put his mind on it. Now he plans to finish his father's funeral first, and wait for the rest. It was quick to get to Palermo from Rome and quick to get back. But this time it's no longer a cargo ship. The prime minister has brought in the Gordon, the best cruise ship in Italy. The cruise ship, which can carry 300 passengers, required him to rush from Venice to Palermo while he was still in Rome. The idea at that time was to send the assassinated Umberto I from Palermo to Rome where the medical facilities were better, but now the body can only be sent to Rome. Fortunately, Prime Minister Caroli took this into consideration and already issued a message asking the officials who stayed behind to prepare for the funeral, and they now need to return to Rome quickly. On April 25th, the Gordon, carrying everyone in the king's body, arrived in Rome. There were also a large number of people on both sides of the road silently seeing off His Majesty. On April 27th, the gate of the Quirinal Palace opened, and the guards in simple clothes walked at the front with various weapons. Then the chrysanthemum-decorated carriage carrying Umberto's body drove away slowly, driven by the charioteer Peng Gang. Following behind were the family members, Queen Margherita and Carlo, who were dressed in mourning clothes. In addition, Uncle Amedia also took his family for a stroll, followed by government officials and representatives from various countries. An expression of grief appeared on everyone's face. It made the atmosphere very depressing. As the funeral procession set off, the people on the street couldn't help but follow suit, and this made the procession grow larger and larger. In this regard, Sabo, who is the mayor of Rome, ordered the police to maintain order and avoid any unexpected incidents. The long procession led all the way to the Pantheon, a temple built by Octavian's son-in-law and now a royal cemetery, where Victor Emmanuel II, who led the unification of Italy, is also buried. Due to the size of the Pantheon, the people who followed were kept out. 4 tall guards carried the coffin containing the body of Umberto I to the grave that had been dug. Such a scene made the queen cry again, which in turn caused other people to cry, and for a time the cemetery was filled with cries. However, no amount of grief could prevent Umberto's coffin from being buried. When the priest came forward to talk about the king's life, Carlo breathed a long sigh of relief. It wasn't that he wasn't sad about Umberto's death, but because he was an adult at heart, he had already passed the sadness. He could tell that except for the royal family, no one else present was in such a sad mood. At least most of it is just an act. For example, the fat man over there looks like his parents are dead. It's so fake. Where is that guy over there? Hey. Carlo saw a grey-haired old man and felt like he had seen him before. I have definitely seen him, but where did I see him? Carlo couldn't care less about the old man now, because the people attending the funeral had already come to greet them as family members. My condolences, Queen. The Queen, who was still crying, replied casually, "This is Ambassador Wells from England." The official who was in charge of the introduction whispered the name of the visitor to Carlo. Why was there a diplomat to introduce him? Because as the next king, Carlo also needed to accept greetings from guests. In order to avoid embarrassment, because he did not know the person, the prime minister specially arranged for a young official to remind him, "Please have your condolences, Your Highness Carlo. Thank you, Ambassador Wells. This is Mr. Danny Dyer, the French ambassador. Please have your condolences, Your Highness Carlo. Thank you, Ambassador Dale." Carlo felt like he was constantly saying thank you to the guests, which made him feel like a puppet being manipulated by others. Then the white-haired old man also appeared in front of him. "This is the distinguished Mr. Giuseppe Garibaldi." When introducing the old man, the young official used honorific words, which shows the official's respect for the old man. It turned out to be him. No wonder I felt familiar. However, when Carlo heard the introduction, he felt more of a sigh of familiarity. The name of Garibaldi has long been well known. It can be said that without him, the unification of Italy would have been much more difficult and would have taken much longer. If you want to choose a selfless person in the unification war, then no one can be convincing except Garibaldi. This is a heroic figure with great charm, but also a heroic tragedy. The reason is very simple. He is a Republican. Without letting Carlo think too much, Garibaldi walked up to him. "My condolences, Your Highness. Thank you for coming, Mr. Garibaldi. It is an honor to meet you, a hero who helped unify Italy." Faced with Carlo's unconventional answer, Garibaldi couldn't help but pause for a moment. "It seems that His Highness thinks I'm a hero." "I think so. You know I'm a Republican, but it still doesn't change the fact that you are a hero." The brief conversation ended like this. Carlo continued talking to the others, but in Garibaldi's heart, the name Carlo remained. Regarding this episode at the funeral, no one knew what Carlo thought of Garibaldi, except the young official behind him. Chapter 7 Carlo I. There are a lot of government affairs recently. After the funeral of Umberto I, Carlo's coronation ceremony will follow. It may sound a bit sad to say it, but it feels too fast for many people. It's really sad to attend two kings' funerals and coronation ceremonies in less than 2 years. However, although it is sad, you still have to participate. When you should point on April 30th, a large number of people in costumes entered the Parliament building. Today they will witness a new king. Although this king is a little younger, it still cannot change the fact that he will become their monarch. As time went by, there were more and more people in the Parliament hall, and people who knew each other began to chat, until a grey-haired old man appeared, causing many people to close their mouths and look at him. Garibaldi was not surprised at all that his appearance had such an effect. When Italy had just been unified, the effect of his appearance in Parliament was even more amazing, and the whole audience fell silent. Of course, Garibaldi was also very clear about the reasons why these people were quiet. But the friend who came with him had never experienced anything like this. "Giuseppe, what's wrong with them?" When asked by his friend, Garibaldi smiled and said, "Nothing, Cosenza. It's just the mice acting surprised when a cat walks in." Yes, Garibaldi is still a Republican, and at the same time he is very contemptuous of Italy's rubber-like parliament. He has said many times that the current parliament is not a parliament chosen by the people through votes, but a toy controlled by kings, nobles and big bourgeoisie. Although what he said was true, it offended these rubber sassafras, and it would be strange to give him a good look. If he hadn't had such high prestige among the people, maybe people would have poured dirty water on him. It's not like it hasn't happened before. Just last year, a journalist named Giovanni Gino Ferenzona wrote 2 pamphlets, The Political Color of Garibaldi and The Ungrateful Garibaldi, to personally attack Garibaldi. As a result, the reporter was assassinated on April 19th. In the end, Garibaldi personally initiated a fundraiser to raise a pension for Ferenzona's widow. Therefore, such a heroic figure with no shortcomings makes many people who hate him speechless. In the streets outside Parliament, the cheers of the crowd reached their peak. A group of guards arrived at the Parliament, protecting several carriages marked with the royal emblem. It was obvious that this was the arrival of His Royal Highness Carlo, who was about to be crowned. In the carriage, Queen Margherita, dressed in widow's clothing, warned Carlo again. "Carlo, the next step will be as we have practiced before. You must remember at this time." Carlo, whose ears were almost ringing with calluses, endured his mother's nagging and answered seriously, "Don't worry, mother, I won't mess it up." At this time, there was a knock on the door outside the carriage, and then the voice of Uncle Amedia. "Carlo, we're here. Get ready to come out." Crunch. The door was opened, and Carlo, dressed in fine clothes, stepped out of the carriage, and then his mother also got out of the carriage. The cheers in the square reached a new high as he got off the bus. The huge cheers made Carlo obviously stunned. "Smile, smile quickly." Following the gentle reminder from the uncle beside him, Carlo raised his eyebrows and showed a trademark smile, then turned around and waved to the cheering crowd. Carlo's wave brought the cheers to the peak, especially some women who raised their voices to the limit. At this time, Carlo had to admit that it was beneficial to have a good skin, especially for young people who are in their prime. They get the biggest bonus. After waving to the crowd of onlookers, Carlo stepped up the steps and walked into the Parliament building under the watchful eyes of everyone. Carlo walked on the steps with his head held high and his eyes fixed as he had rehearsed followed by other people, including his mother and uncle on his left and right. Walking to the door, Assembly Speaker Leslie acted as a usher and guided Carlo towards the hall. After entering the hall, everyone stood up and watched Carlo walk to the podium, where an old man dressed as a white-haired priest was quietly waiting for his arrival. Carlo was not surprised when facing this old man. He had seen him before during rehearsals. This is Bishop Angeli, who was invited from Milan. Although the relationship between the Kingdom of Italy and the Vatican is tense, it does not mean that all Catholic priests must obey the Pope's orders, and Bishop Angeli is one of the few. So he was invited for this king's coronation. While waiting for Carlo to stand in front of the rostrum, the bishop spoke. The only voice in the quiet hall was Bishop Angeli's voice. His Royal Highness Carlo, are you willing to dedicate your life to Italy? I do. Mingyangs answer with a hint of childish voice made the bishop nod with satisfaction. Then he picked up the crown representing Italy from the tray carried by the entourage and placed it on Carlo's head. Now, on behalf of God, I give you the crown and ask you to be kind to the Lamb of God. Then, Bishop Angeli picked up the scepter representing the king's power from another tray and handed it to Carlo. The short and sacred coronation ceremony was completed in this way, and then everyone, led by Prime Minister Caroli, Parliament Speaker Leslie, and Uncle Amedia, Duke of Aosta, saluted Carlo. From this moment on, Carlo would no longer be a prince, but King of Italy. Carlo, who had completed his coronation, did not wait for an easy moment. Because next he will have to parade with floats and accept the tributes of the people. So for the rest of the night, Carlo maintained the king's demeanor and talked quietly with his uncle. But he didn't have to wait long before someone came to tell him that the float outside was ready. Then, with the support of everyone, Carlo boarded the float and accepted the people's tribute. The entire parade route has been tightly protected, and Carlo felt like a monkey being watched, allowing others to point out. This float parade lasted for 2 hours. When it was over, he felt extremely happy and vowed that there would be no next time. This feeling was really uncomfortable. But no matter what, Carlo has now become the third king of the Kingdom of Italy. Maybe you can make some plans for the future now. These 2 chapters were so painful to write. If anyone is dissatisfied, that's all. My level of steamed buns is limited, so I can only do this. Okay, now comes the plot of seizing power that everyone likes. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8: Bad Situation. After becoming the King of Italy, Carlo still did not get rid of the fate of having to attend classes. Not only that, he also needed to attend more classes. This left Carlo, who wanted to achieve great success, to immerse himself in numerous homework assignments, but it's not without its benefits. That is, now he can read all kinds of Italian information at will, which also gives him a clear understanding of Italy. But you don't know it until you see it, but you will be shocked when you see it. According to the data, the situation in Italy is not good at all. It can even be said to be very bad. First of all, Italy's domestic population reached 28.21 million. Although this number is not as large as that of Germany and France, it is higher than the 25.7 million in the UK. However, compared with the United Kingdom, which is mainly industrial and financial, Italy has more of its population involved in agriculture, and it is well known that the output value of agriculture is the lowest. The proportion of Italian agriculture has always been greater than 50%. This proportion is also among the best in Europe. It can be imagined how dependent the Italian economy is on agriculture. One more thing, it was not until 1900 that the proportion of domestic agriculture in Italy fell below 50. It can be seen that in these 2 decades, Italy's domestic industrialization was not promoted at all. But the key thing is that Italy relies so heavily on agriculture, but the Italian terrain is not suitable for agricultural production. Italy's domestic terrain is dominated by mountains and hills, with small patches of plains only along the coast point. It is precisely because of this that the Italian economy relies heavily on cities such as Turin, Milan, Genoa, and Venice in the northern plains. At the same time, the gap between the rich and the poor in the north and south of Italy has also caused conflicting emotions among the people in the two places. Of course, economic reasons alone cannot cause such a big confrontation. In addition, religion, language, culture, customs, etc. are also mixed. These are serious tests for the Italian government and in point of course. This is also the reason why Italy has been divided for too long. Although its national thinking is recognized by the people, years of habits are difficult to change. Point of course, it would be nice if Italy's problems were really that simple. In fact, Italy's problems are much more serious. First of all, although Italy's reunification gave people a feeling of sudden luck, it also caused a lot of problems. First of all, Italy is not financially wealthy and relies mainly on agricultural taxation. In fact, Italy does not have much fiscal revenue. Its annual fiscal revenue is only 1.2 billion lire, while France's 2.95 billion franc. 1 franc is exchanged for 1 lire during the same period. From here, it can be seen that France's fiscal revenue is 2.45 times that of Italy. With more fiscal revenue, you can do more things alone, but with less fiscal revenue, you can naturally do less things. However, the most urgent thing in Italy now is to connect all parts of the country, so extensive construction and railway construction is a top priority. Italy has successively built many railway lines over the years, such as the railway from Rome to Milan, the railway from Turin to Venice through Milan, etc. Of course, these railways are also gold-eating beasts, which are extremely difficult for Italy with low fiscal revenue. The Italian fiscal data currently seen by Carlo shows that the current annual fiscal deficit reaches 300 million lire. Then large-scale borrowing becomes the only option. Fortunately, Italy's current debt situation is not bad, so Italian government bonds are not yet out of favor in the bond market. If it were as debt-ridden as Spain, the market would probably not accept it, unless it offered an interest rate of 1 or 2 cents. However, seeing this situation, Carlo is worried, because the current national debt, which increases 1/4 of fiscal revenue every year, will make Italy's debt burden too heavy, and it may really have to borrow debt to pay interest like Spain. Although Carlo was worried about this, he had nothing to do now. Although he was the king, it was his uncle Amedeo, Duke of Aosta, who currently exercised the king's power, but now he needs to be called the regent. But unlike his father, the regent didn't worry as much about the kingdom as his father did. He didn't spend as much time dealing with government affairs as he did going to the ball. This made Carlo feel very miserable, but he had nothing to do, because according to European practice, it is impossible for him to hold power before he reaches adulthood. Despite this, I still think of Carlo from the East in my heart, and I still understand the situation in Italy. There are currently few workers in Italy, and their wages are at a low level in Europe. This also has a lot to do with the excessive number of unemployed people in the country. According to government statistics, the current unemployment rate in Italy is about 6%, but Carlo believes that this number is wrong, because more than 100,000 people immigrate to Italy every year. Italy is currently the second largest emigration country in Europe, second only to the United Kingdom. However, compared with the United Kingdom, which mainly immigrate to its own colonies, Italy's immigrants are more likely to immigrate because they cannot survive. It should be pointed out here that Germany, the country of origin of immigrants, that has always been famous for Italy, is now experiencing a rapid decrease in the number of immigrants. Its annual immigration has dropped from 20 to 300,000 to about 100,000 now, and its number of immigrants has plummeted. And it can be clearly seen that Germany's immigration will be tightened because the current economic situation in Germany is much better than that in Italy. When it comes to the economy, Italy really has nothing to say. Compared with other countries currently vigorously developing industrialization, the country is still dominated by handicrafts. The only areas that are better are a few northern areas such as Milan and Turin. However, its industrial scale is simply not enough compared to countries such as Britain, France, and Germany. Not to mention that there are very few large companies employing more than 500 people. What do you think these situations made Carlo think of? That's right, it's China in the Far East. Carlo's first reaction was that Italy and China are really similar. They are all agricultural countries. Both are overcrowded. Italy is a shame. Their domestic finances are not enough to spend, and their industrial scale is not strong. Of course, one thing Italy is better than China is that it knows that industrialization is the only way out point, but compared with China, which has a vast territory and abundant resources, Italy's resources are not suitable for industrialization. How can the famous marble and clay be industrialized and rich in geothermal resources, allowing people to soak in hot springs and become rich? It can be said that the more Carlo watched, the more he felt that Italy's poor performance in modern times was entirely due to resource constraints. Look at how much help the Ruhr coal mine occupied by Germany added to industrialization point, and Italy, even in later generations, when exploration technology was so advanced, was still a country lacking resources. For this reason, Carlo felt that he was under a lot of pressure. If he wanted Italy's economy and industry to develop, he must catch up with the second industrial revolution point. For this reason, he planned to talk to his uncle and the Prime Minister. I've been away for 3 days. I'm sorry. Chapter 9, Carlo's proposal. The busy city of Rome was no different after Carlo ascended the throne. It was also lively. Except for some pregnant girls talking about this good-looking king, there is still no change in life. Well, Carlo, who was missed by the girl, stretched for a long time, and then looked at the manuscript he had prepared with satisfaction. This was a carefully prepared plan by Carlo to build 1 or 2 large electrical experimental centers in Italy, then use the results produced by the experimental center to accelerate the electrification process in Italy and achieve overtaking in corners. In Carlo's view, if Italy currently wants to achieve overtaking in corners, it can only start with electrification point. Now that we are ready to embark on the path of electrification, we must develop electrification laboratories. This time Carlo no longer planned to use the same trick of making small fights before. It was too classy. It's completely like a handicraft workshop. The key is that I can't even get the Tesla I want. This time Carlo is directly targeting General Electric in the future, and if it wants to build a large-scale R/U0026D center, if there are less than 500 scientific researchers, it is too embarrassing to go out and greet people, and if the area is less than 20 hectares, it is considered small. Of course, the cost is not cheap. The initial budget is 20 million lire. After completion, the annual research and development expenditure alone will not be less than 10 million lire. In addition, Carlo certainly did not decide on such a large investment at once. The main reference is Edison's General Electric company in the United States. Of course, Edison is still looking for suitable bamboo to make carbon filaments all over the world. There is also Siemens, which is doing well in Germany and is also within the scope of Carlo's reference point. Moreover, Carlo found someone to be responsible for formulating this investment amount, because it needs to meet his requirement to produce results within a few years. Issues such as funding and staffing need to be resolved urgently. Naturally, money must be used to open the way and sufficient funds and manpower be used to speed up progress. After all, his laboratory needs to rush, otherwise Italy will spend a lot of money just to purchase the patent. After Carlo put down the plan he was satisfied with, he called his confidant Domingo. "Where is my uncle?" Facing Carlo's inquiry, how could Domingo, as his confidant, not report? "Your Majesty, the Prince Regent is currently a guest at the home of Baroness House." Domingo's words made Carlo's mood immediately deteriorate, and even this plan was not so good. Since he became the regent, of course, his uncle also brought his mischief in Turin with him. In just 2 months, there were several named wives, and perhaps even more unknown ones. It perfectly explains the word stallion. As the person who holds the actual power of the king, is it really okay to mess around like this? Thinking of this, Carlo was furious. "I didn't realize that I didn't even care about Naya, a young cabbage next to me. Those who want to do great things must have great courage. What can a person who can't even take care of his lower body do well?" Although Carlo was extremely angry, he had no choice but to let go in the end. "What can I do? I can't just forgive him." Who allowed him to have only such an uncle? Even though he was a bit of a loser, from a certain perspective, it was also good for him. It's just that I don't know if I can get this kind of benefit point with this concern. Carlo bided his time for a meeting with his uncle and the Prime Minister. According to a certain practice, until the monarch reaches adulthood, there will be one day every week or 10 days when the regent, Prime Minister and others discuss military and state decisions in front of the monarch point. Although Carlo has no decision-making power in this, it can at least give him a basic understanding of the government's handling of affairs, and this day is very close, just the day after tomorrow. 2 days later. In the meeting hall of the Quirinal Palace, the young King Carlo was seriously listening to the discussions or quarrels of his ministers. Sicily's agricultural harvest has failed this year, so some taxes must be reduced or exempted, otherwise those farmers will not be able to survive. Mr. Custer, how much reduction do you think is appropriate? I think it needs to be reduced by at least half, and for this reason the governor of Sicily, Mr. Ambic, also agrees with me. The one who was speaking generously was Agriculture Minister Mark Ryder. This man in his 50s, with a little old man's head and a wine trough and a red nose, was arguing for tax exemptions in Sicily. This is too much, and it is simply impossible. Our country currently spends too much. If we reduce Sicilian agricultural taxes by half, it will create a bigger hole. Who will fill it? The one who jumped out to object was Finance Minister Giorgiali. This little old man was also very lean and worried about Italy's finances. As a result, he was extremely smart and his shiny little head stood out in the crowd. Carlo has seen a lot of situations like this in the past 2 months, but he still finds it very interesting. However, compared with Carlo, his uncle and regent Amedia was different. He couldn't help but yawn. This made Carlo feel uncomfortable in his heart, but he still asked in a low voice with concern on his face, "Uncle, didn't you sleep well last night?" Facing his nephew's words of concern, Amedia felt a little embarrassed. Yes, uncle didn't sleep well last night. He has been too busy recently." Having said this, Amedia thought of those beautiful carcasses last night. Unfortunately, he exerted too much force and probably needed to take a rest point. But what he didn't notice was that when he said this, many of the ministers below couldn't help but frown. The reputation of this regent spread throughout Rome in just 2 months, and now everyone knows about this romantic regent. Although Amedia himself didn't notice it, Carlo did. This gave him a bad feeling. This uncle lost his dignity among officials in 2 months, which is not good at all. Then Carlo didn't speak again, and continued to observe the handling of government affairs, and in this, Carlo made some discoveries. That is, Prime Minister Carolo's authority among officials is increasing, including in the handling of Sicilian taxes. After he spoke, the dispute was resolved. Of course, the Prime Minister has a very high political level. He does not take sides, and speaks facts and reason. Carlo vaguely felt that even without him, and his uncle who was about to become a vase, he could handle these things. This is not so much that he is dissatisfied with the Prime Minister's ability, but that the regent, as his uncle, is too unsatisfactory. This will lead to a power imbalance and concentrate power on him alone. Another speaker of the 3 regents, Leslie, can exert more influence in the parliament. Now everyone knows that the parliament is just a rubber stamp and of no use. Thinking of this, Carlo became even more worried about this. After finally handling all aspects of government affairs, Carlo immediately cheered up. He knew that his first proposal was very important and related to his image. "Please, wait a moment, I have a proposal." After calling everyone, Carlo came up with his own plan. Chapter 10: Humiliation. Facing Carlo's hopeful eyes, Caroli, as Prime Minister, took over the plan that entrusted his hard work. After reading it patiently, the Prime Minister handed Carlo's plan to others to see. After everyone circulated it, Carlo waited patiently for a reply. Although the Finance Minister secretly pouted during this, Carlo was still patient. Patience is a virtue, especially for a 15-year-old like him. But he immediately felt that his patience was about to be exhausted. "Your Majesty, this plan is very good. It can serve as a guide for Italy's future scientific research and development." The person who said this was Minister of Education Ancelotti. This old man had the same name as the famous head coach of later generations. He was also a fat man, but his words made Carlo feel that he could add a fat man point, and when Ancelotti, the fat man, opened his mouth, it seemed that everyone started talking and immediately attracted a burst of agreement. Your Majesty's plan is really good and provides a good idea for Italy's future development. The scene was filled with such praises. In his previous life, Carlo would have thought that this was praising himself. But he has been in Italy for more than a year, and he is well informed by what he has heard orally, and he knows that these are all nonsense, because it does not involve core issues such as whether to build an R/U0026D center, and when to build it. What's even more irritating is that his uncle Amedia is completely absent-minded, or he simply doesn't understand the meaning of these words. With such a pig teammate on the stand, Carlo didn't know where to vent his anger. And it's hard for you to get angry like this. They're all complimenting you. It's just nonsense and has no practical effect. Maybe he felt that Carlo's expression was gradually getting worse, or he felt that this was too disrespectful to the young monarch, so the voices in the hall gradually became quieter. At this time the Prime Minister stood up. Your Majesty, this plan is really good. Regardless of the cost, it must be studied before making a decision. I hope your Majesty will understand. The Prime Minister's words sounded comforting, and Carlo took the opportunity to go down the steps. I didn't think carefully about this. I should ask the Prime Minister for his opinion in advance, as if he agreed with Carlo's words. Prime Minister Caroli nodded and replied, I will be happy to advise His Majesty. At this moment, it was as if nothing had happened before, and the scene once again showed an atmosphere of harmony between the monarch and his ministers. But Carlo, who was unwilling to give up, asked again, I wonder how many days the Prime Minister will study it. Hurry. Up to 3 to 5 days. Wait for half a month. As the Prime Minister's words fell, today's affairs in the council hall were over. The ministers walked out in 2s and 3s, and the Prime Minister also left with Carlo's painstaking plan. Among them, the uncle as the regent completely performed the role of being listless during the meeting, full of energy after the meeting, and was the first to leave. There is no cloud at all. Maybe some lady is waiting for him. After everyone left, Carlo sat still and did not move. He was reflecting on today's actions and whether there was anything unreasonable. If you think about it carefully, it's nothing. It's just that he suddenly came up with a plan, which surprised the ministers. It seems that next time, I'd better find someone to discuss it. But who should I look for? Logically, I should look for my uncle. When I think of this uncle's actions, I might as well forget it. Looking for the Prime Minister, Carlo had already rejected this suggestion in his heart. You know the actions of those ministers before. Maybe he was behind it. It gives me a headache just thinking about it. Why is there not a suitable candidate? Not mentioning that Carlo was seeking allies within the government. The Prime Minister and everyone appeared at the entrance of the palace, and the waiting carriage rushed over immediately. As a high-ranking official, he naturally works hard for the development of Italy. And it is normal to have his own private carriage. Jaggily, let's go together. A greeting suddenly came from behind the waiting Chancellor of Finance. Different from turning his head, the Finance Minister, who was already accustomed to hearing this, immediately turned his head with a smile. Okay, Your Excellency Prime Minister, it is an honor to share a carriage with you. When the carriage with the Prime Minister's logo stopped, and the charioteer opened the door, the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance got into the carriage. However, when getting into the carriage, a document held by the Prime Minister fell to the ground. If anyone who recognizes Carlo's handwriting sees it, this is exactly the plan for building an R/U0026D center that he wrote. The Prime Minister didn't seem to notice this, and his chariot didn't seem to notice it either, and just left. The snow white document was just lying on the ground, with no one trying to pick it up. After all the ministers left, this document still remained here. Prime Minister, is this appropriate? In the Prime Minister's carriage, the Chancellor felt that this was not a good idea. What's the matter? This is just a boy's whim. As long as you give enough response, he will respect you. The indifferent Prime Minister is not worried at all. He now feels that the death of the king is not a bad thing. Although he was promoted by King Umberto, power is really a good thing and makes people so fascinated. Moreover, he has a young monarch and an unreliable regent. Carlo feels that this should be the best opportunity given by God. He can bring Italy into a new era, a democratic country, rather than a monarchy. This is really the best of times. Italy will complete its transformation in his own hands, and he may also become one of the greatest prime ministers in future generations. Well, Prime Minister Carlo still has some conscience, and has no intention of changing Italy to a republican system. For him now, winning over other people is the most important thing. A qualified monarch must know what he should and should not do, especially when his power is deprived. But even if he is not deprived, Prime Minister Carlo can teach King Carlo to follow the rules. We can put aside the thoughts of His Excellency the Prime Minister Carlo, who had just recalled his actions, left the king's throne. At this time, he saw the attendant Domingo hurried over, and he seemed to be holding a document in his hand. A somewhat curious Carlo couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong, Domingo, Your Majesty? Take a look. This is what the Prime Minister left behind." After Domingo finished speaking, he lowered his head. Carlo's expression turned ugly as soon as he took it, because he recognized his own handwriting. "Tell me how you fell down." Although Carlo's tone was calm, Domingo felt as if he was in the desert heat, and sweat could not help but flow out. "I felt like I was in the cold northern Europe again, and my legs couldn't help but tremble." However, His Majesty's questions must be answered, so he had no choice but to report truthfully. The guards guarding the palace gate discovered that the Prime Minister was missing. "Did anyone remind me?" There were a lot of people blocking the way, and when the guards found out, they all left. Although Domingo did not say anything, Carlo knew that he was ignored by these officials. It is more likely that the Prime Minister did this on purpose, and that he deliberately left it at the door. Maybe the Prime Minister didn't notice. Maybe he will come and ask. Then leave it with the guard and wait for him to pick it up. Putting this plan on Domingo, Carlo left without looking back. 3 days later, the Prime Minister sent no one to inquire. A week later, still no one came to ask. Carlo was now certain that the Prime Minister was really humiliating him. A young monarch is still a monarch who cannot control power, and it is difficult for others to gain respect. In addition, Western monarchs were not as powerful as their Eastern counterparts. Chapter 11. One wave comes after another. Such humiliation makes Carlo sleepless, but if he wants to take revenge, he should just go to bed, because the Prime Minister is currently beyond his control. According to the words in the movie, the referees, organizers, and co-organizers are all my people, so why bother with this? Just go home. Obviously Carlo is not someone willing to accept such humiliation, and he is more patient than others. What should I be afraid of when I'm young? If I don't rely on these officials, I can still rely on the royal family. Well, it's not about relying on members of the royal family. Currently, my uncle is unreliable and my mother doesn't understand politics at all. As for my younger brothers and sisters, let's just have fun. To be more precise, he plans to build a research and development center by himself, relying on the royal family's assets. But before that, he had two people to convince. One was his mother, and the other was the regent's uncle, who couldn't help him. His mother was easy to deal with. Carlo had already figured out her character. It was not difficult to get his mother to speak, but it was a bit difficult to get his uncle to agree. Although this uncle has fallen into gentleness, there is still a problem in getting his consent. It should be noted here that, although Carlo has become the king of Italy, and automatically becomes the patriarch of the Savoy family, due to Carlo's young age, his mother Margherita and uncle Amedeo jointly oversee these family properties. Therefore, without the consent of these two people, Carlo still cannot use any of the family funds. And only his own private money is at his own discretion. However, he didn't have much private money. After becoming king, Carlo only received an income of 200,000 lire per month. Adding in what he had received from his younger brother before, the total amount was less than 1 million. So Carlo is currently shifting his focus to the plan to obtain the consent of his mother and uncle. Of course, before that, Carlo had one more thing to do. Carlo was writing a letter seriously on the table. He could swear that he had never been so serious, even to his girlfriend in his previous life. After writing the last line and signing his name, Carlo stretched and then put the letter folded and placed in a letter bearing the crest of their Savoy family. Yes, Carlo planned to invite Tesla again this time, and he paid enough attention to the last failure. Although I don't know the specific reason why Tesla didn't come last time, this time he did the best he could. The salary is adequate, according to the top standards. A monthly salary of 2,500 liras is enough, and enough respect is given. Point in a word, Tesla must be kidnapped this time, even if it means tying him up. Point. Since he plans to use all means, he naturally cannot leave this matter to someone he is not familiar with. I believe that Domingo will know what to do this time after the lessons he experienced last time. Point. Thinking of this, Carlo called Domingo over. Domingo, I want you to do something this time. Seeing His Majesty looking at him extremely seriously, Domingo's heart skipped a beat. He had only seen him once before, and that time he messed up. Point. Although Domingo was mentally prepared, he still felt a little humiliated when Carlo told him about the mission. This was not because he thought Carlo was insulting him, but because he felt humiliated that he failed to get things done last time, forcing His Majesty to invite him again. Point. It was because of his failure in doing things that His Majesty Carlo had to lower his profile even more. So after getting this letter, he had already decided that if Mr. Tesla refused His Majesty's kindness again, he would not hesitate to do so. Let him know the consequences of His Majesty's good intentions being rejected. Point. Unable to notice the changes in his confidant's heart, Carlo sent him away and began to prepare to face getting the money from his mother and uncle. Turn your back to hate. Carlo was full of fighting spirit at this moment. Point. Mother was easy to handle, and Carlo made her agree the next day. The method is very simple, that is, show up inadvertently during the mother's salon party, and then behave as expected in front of her friends. At this time, while she is happy, whisper your request to her, and give a reasonable explanation, and the matter will be solved. It's done. Point. In a certain way, my mother is no different from other people. They all give rewards after satisfying the other person's psychological needs. Now that the mother has solved the problem, the next step is to get the uncle to agree. But if you want him to agree, you have to think of other ways. Carlo already has some clues about this, but it will take some time. Time passed quickly, and it was time to meet my uncle again. Amelia, Duke of Aosta, the regent, walked in with deep dark circles under his eyes and a yawn. Uncle, your mental state has been very bad recently. This is because my sleep quality has been very poor recently, and after coming to Rome, I feel uncomfortable. Carlo looked at his uncle, who was serious and talking nonsense, and just looked at him quietly. Amelia, who was so overwhelmed by Carlo's gaze, stopped talking. Uncle, your reputation is known throughout Rome these days. This will not do you any good. Carlo talked about his uncle with great sincerity. As the one who was being scolded, Regent Amelia felt that his nephew's every move was very much like his brother, which made him subconsciously ignore his nephew's age and couldn't help but treat him as an adult. Carlo, who felt that the initial effect was achieved, continued. What's wrong, my uncle? When discussing government affairs, you don't play your role at all. You just watch the ministers decide what to do on their own. It shouldn't be like this. You should play a core role in government affairs, and instead of watching them solve their own problems, if they develop such a habit, then where will our Savoy family be in the kingdom? Perhaps. Carlo's tone and movements were very similar to his deceased brother, which made Amedeo feel a little nervous, and there was a hint of begging for mercy in his words. I don't know why. Ever since I came back from Spain, I have had a headache with government affairs, even when I was in Turin. Seeing Carlo's confused eyes, his uncle became a little anxious. What I said is true. I didn't dare to tell anyone else before. Hearing his uncle's words made Carlo feel like he had been cheated. I thought it was just because of being carefree, but I didn't expect there to be such a reason. However, in order to confirm the situation, Carlo continued to ask, what would that feel like? I felt nervous, sweaty, a little overwhelmed, etc. So when I was in Turin, I stopped touching various things. After hearing his uncle's explanation, Carlo finally confirmed that it seemed to be the shadow left by being a puppet king in Spain. Is there a cure for this? There is still a way. There are such psychiatrists in Europe now, but they are not mainstream now. It doesn't matter if the uncle is an ordinary person or a small nobleman, he will be cured. but now that he is the regent, there is nothing he can do. What would the Savoy family do if people knew that the regent had a mental illness? As for private treatment, it is not possible. His identity is too conspicuous, and no one can guarantee that there will be no mistakes. This gave Carlo an unspeakable feeling. Originally, he just wanted to get his uncle to agree to withdraw some of the family funds. For this reason, he specially found the former captain of the bodyguard, Baron Filmaki, and carefully imitated his father's tone of voice and posture. And today he chose to stand in the shadows just for this scene. Unexpectedly, I worked too hard and let my uncle reveal the secret himself. Although Carlo doesn't know what to do now, he wants to satisfy his plan first. Then, you did the right thing. You would rather let others think you are a romantic than let others know you are incapable of handling government affairs. I don't know why, but after his nephew said this, Amedia felt a lot more at ease. Uncle, there is something that needs your approval now. I need to use family funds and I need your approval. No problem, I will agree. Very good, then you should continue to live a successful life like this. Chapter 12, taking advantage of the situation. Although Carlo solved the funding problem, it was certainly not that simple to build an R/U0026D center. He needs to deal with a lot of things such as site selection and finding someone to run the electrical R/U0026D center, which makes his life so fulfilling every day. Beyond that, Carlo had other ideas. A small island of Caprera, located in the northeast of Sardinia, is the residence of Italian national hero Garibaldi. The island has become very famous since Garibaldi moved in. There is an endless stream of people coming here every day, but Garibaldi does not want to see them and enjoys himself on this island alone. There is nothing wrong with raising flowers and fishing every day. But today, Garibaldi's leisurely life ended. A letter from Rome appeared in front of him. The unique symbol on the letter, a cross and crown with a red background, was not seen by Garibaldi before. Of course, at that time, he was still fighting for the unification of Italy, and he had also met the father of Italy. Although the two ideas are completely different, the determination to unify Italy can be felt in each other. If not, how could Garibaldi be willing to follow in his footsteps and contribute to the cause of Italian unification? Of course, there were conflicts between the two because of ideological issues. But in the end, with the combined efforts of the two, the Kingdom of Italy was unified. When the basis for all cooperation is gone, parting ways is inevitable. However, Garibaldi's huge prestige in Italy at this time made him fearless of threats and accusations from anyone. But now the kid from the Savoy family actually wants Garibaldi to help him. Isn't this funny? Who doesn't know whether Garibaldi is a Republican or a Republican who has fought against the enemy? If you look at the fact that the government has specially arranged personnel to protect him on the island, you will know the attitude towards him in the kingdom. And how should I put it? That a person like him who was almost under house arrest could still attract the attention of the new king. Garibaldi looked at this letter with tender handwriting and couldn't help but think deeply. What's wrong, Giuseppe? Seeing Garibaldi meditating while holding a letter, Cossen's thesis, a good friend, asked with concern. This is one of the few good friends of Garibaldi, and the two have fought side by side for many years. Compared with the aging Garibaldi, Cosenz is much younger, but no matter how young he is, Cosenz is still in his 50s. Nothing. This is just a letter from the king who ascended the throne. In the letter, he said that he admired the red shirt army I created and hoped to meet these Italian men who fought hard for the country. Haha, this will disappoint the king. The red shirts are all old. There is a reason for Cosenz to say this. The recognized red shirt army refers to the army that Garibaldi went on an expedition to Sicily to capture the kingdom of the Two Sicilies. They were called the Red Shirt Army because they all wore red military uniforms. This army defeated the kingdom of the Two Sicilies and captured its capital, Naples. In the end, Garibaldi dedicated the kingdom to Emmanuel II and helped him ascend the throne as king of Italy. Later, during the Italian-Austrian War, Garibaldi formed another Red Shirt Army. In addition to the Franco-Prussian War, Garibaldi formed 3 volunteer armies. However, the most famous one was the expedition to the kingdom of the Two Sicilies. 20 years have passed since then, and the good guys have become greasy uncles. That's why Cosenz said that the young king was afraid that he would be disappointed. Obviously, Cosenz regarded Carlo as the kind of boy who admired Gallipoli and wanted to admire the heroic appearance of the red shirt back then. Facing the words of his old friend, Garibaldi shook his head. I feel something is different. You and I have seen this young monarch at that time, and he doesn't look like a young man. Have you discovered anything that's not true? Then why do you think this boy is not simple? Intuition. Cosenz is still very convinced of his old friend Garibaldi's intuition, which saved the lives of many people on the battlefield and led them to defeat many opponents. So when Garibaldi said the words intuition, Cosenz's expression turned serious. So, what are you going to do this time? At the moment, I don't know. But since His Majesty wants to see me, he still needs to see me. But this time I don't plan to see him directly. How about you go for me? Cosenz was a little surprised when he heard what his old friend said. He didn't expect Garibaldi to want to represent him. Is this appropriate? Is there anything inappropriate? If I go to Rome, many people will feel uneasy. Garibaldi's explanation made Cosenz smile. No problem. Since you don't want to attract attention, I might as well move around. Garibaldi smiled like a child when he heard Cosenz agree. Then I'll trouble you this time. When you come back, I'll make my best seafood pizza to treat you. My mouth is watering right now because of what you said. When I come back, you need to make pizza for me for at least 3 days. No problem. After the two made an agreement, Cosenz left Caprera Island on a transportation boat that afternoon, just like he had experienced in the military. Carlo wanted to know nothing about Garibaldi's actions. Of course, he contacted Garibaldi because he wanted to use the momentum of this national hero to add weight to himself. Of course, in addition to that, Garibaldi's red shirt team, which was so powerful in Europe, he didn't have any ideas. Of course, he does not want to completely accept the entire red shirt army. Although a few thousand red shirt troops are no problem for the government, it will cause dissatisfaction in the army. Well, the Italian army was a complete joke in later generations, and it is still, but to Carlo now, it is like a pillar of heaven. Moreover, the army is deeply involved in the country. If he cannot reach the point of monopolizing power, he will never touch this hornet's nest. He just wanted to absorb the essence of the red shirts and form a small force that was completely loyal to him. If you want both loyalty and sufficient combat effectiveness, then after many calculations, only Garibaldi's red shirts are the most suitable. I hope Garibaldi is as heroic as the rumors say, otherwise Carlo's desire to build his own team will be really troublesome. Chapter 13. Your Majesty, Tesla has been captured. Kamenz Street in Prague is nominally a street, but the narrow road can only pass a carriage, damaged street lights that cannot illuminate, garbage on the ground, and homeless people lying everywhere on the street all tell the world that this is what it is. Better than the slums, there are also very few shops here, except for a few groceries and cheap clothing stores, and there are bars with an unbearable environment. In the evening and dusk, the people returning home went home like migratory birds, and Mr. Stella, like the crowd, strolled on the way home. Hello, Mr. Tesla. Hello, Mr. Ankus. I wish you a great business today. Tesla greeted people he knew and walked home. Some people gave him small gifts on the way, but he politely declined them. Tesla is also considered a celebrity here. Although he moved here not long ago, he still looms large here because he is the only college student living here and a student of Charles University, the first university in Central Europe. Although he is only an auditor, he is still so out of reach for the lower class people living here. So every time he comes home, he will get everyone's kindness, and he has successfully become the most hated person among the children here. Speaking of which, Tesla is lucky to live here. He used to live in a better place than here, but unfortunately it was robbed and ransacked, so Tesla had no choice but to move here. Although the living environment here is poor, the people are pretty nice, so he is still used to living there. After arriving at the building where he lived, he opened the door of the apartment and checked whether there was any letter from him in the mailbox. Tesla went upstairs. However, the occasional creaking sound from the corridor floor made Tesla feel that maybe he should go back to the building. Talk to the landlady. The corridor should be repaired. Crunch. Tesla opened the door to his room, and had a clear view of the room. Like most bachelors, Tesla's room was messy, with garbage discarded everywhere, smelly sheets, and messy desktops all showing this. Throwing the books in his hands on the bed, Tesla lay down on the only chair to take a rest. Although he was a little hungry now, he planned to wait and see if Mrs. Clit downstairs would send a small gift. He liked the pastries made by this wife the most. They were so delicious. Okay, let's stop pretending. The real reason is that Tesla has to run out of money and he must save money. At present, he can no longer maintain 3 meals a day unless he stops being an auditor. However, this is unacceptable to Tesla, so it can only find solutions from other aspects. The current embarrassment made Tesla feel a trace of regret in his heart. If he had known that he would be in such a mess for money, he should have agreed to the Italians' conditions. Although the conditions offered by the other party were somewhat outrageous, he could still give it a try. Maybe the other person is not a liar. Tesla was thinking about it when suddenly there was a sound of footsteps outside. The wooden corridor was like this. The slightest movement could be heard in the room. Tesla had been here for so long, and was already familiar with it. When he heard it, he knew it was the sound of hard leather shoes. The footsteps became louder and louder, and they stopped when they reached his door. There was a knock on the door, which surprised Tesla. He didn't have many friends in Prague, so who would come looking for him? Tesla opened the door, and a man in a dress and a top hat appeared in front of him. Hello, Mr. Tesla, we meet again. Your place is really hard to find. The visitor took off his hat, and Tesla recognized the visitor. This was the visitor from Italy. Seeing Domingo in front of him, Tesla asked curiously. Hello, Mr. Domingo, what do you want from me this time? Can you invite us in? Following Domingo's words, Tesla discovered that there were 2 similarly dressed capable men standing on both sides of the door. Thinking that he had nothing to worry about, Tesla stepped away from the door. Then please come in. As the 3 of them walked in, they couldn't help but frown when they saw that there wasn't even a place to sit in Tesla's room. Mr. Tesla, your life is really simple. Ahem. I haven't cleaned it for a long time. It does look a bit messy. Domingo, the leader, didn't care about this. No matter how he stood like this, there was really no way to stand in this place. In order to find Mr. Tesla named by His Majesty, Domingo found this place after another hard search. Thinking of the task assigned by Carlo, Domingo did not dare to neglect, and immediately explained his purpose. Mr. Tesla, we are here for only one thing this time, and that is to invite you to Italy. This is a personal letter from His Majesty Carlo to you, and the reasons are all written in the letter. Domingo then took out the letter written by Carlo and handed it to Tesla. Tesla glanced at the pattern on the letter, took it, opened it and read it. This is an invitation letter. In the letter, Carlo describes his plan to build a large electrical research center and invite Tesla to work there. In the letter, Carlo also promised to give him a high salary of no less than 2,000 lire per month. Such promises and treatment moved Tesla's heart. Although he didn't understand why His Majesty Carlo of Italy valued him so much, and the two had never met, his recent experience made him interested in meeting a friend of the king. Have a good understanding. However, although Tesla has agreed in his heart, he cannot show it too obviously in terms of face. After all, he still needs to be shameless. So after reading the letter, Carlo spoke. I am very grateful to His Majesty Carlo for taking a fancy to me. I'm honored for this. As soon as Tesla spoke, Domingo's expression changed a little because he had heard these words before. It seemed that Tesla wanted to reject His Majesty's kindness again, but fortunately he was prepared. I saw Domingo making a gesture behind Tesla's back, and the 2 capable men behind him immediately pounced on him. He threw Tesla to the ground, who was about to say that he decided to accept the invitation. Then before he could speak, a man covered his mouth and nose with a pungent smelling handkerchief, and within 2 minutes Tesla passed out. Before he passed out, his only thought was that he had been fooled. These people were either liars or kidnappers. After finishing all this, the 3 people immediately packed the Tesla in bags, carried it to the carriage waiting outside the door, and drove away. No one was alerted along the way. Only Domingo sent a telegram to the post office in code, which translated to, Your Majesty, Truss has been captured. Chapter 14 Meeting. The telegram sent by Domingo made Carlo furious. How can Tesla use tying methods to make others work willingly? But a day later, he added a telegram to make Carlo less angry. Because of the misunderstanding, Tesla was almost forced to come. After explaining that he was willing to come, and Domingo's apology, the invitation became normal, and Tesla's anger was more or less relieved. However, Domingo's actions this time made Carlo afraid to ask him to hire someone in the future. It seemed that he needed to find someone more experienced and stable to do these tasks, not to mention the characterized Domingo. Carlo now has a more important matter to deal with. Garibaldi's personal representative has arrived in Rome, and Carlo attaches great importance to it. He deliberately learned about Mr. Cosenza's experience from Baron Filmic. This was a good friend of Garibaldi, who had fought with him in the Red Shirt Army before, and was his valued right-hand man. Otherwise, he would not have become the personal envoy of this national hero. Carlo also attaches great importance to this. This can be regarded as his first official contact with the former Red Shirts represented by Garibaldi. It is related to his future layout, so he must not pay attention to it. To this end, he also called Baron Filmic to his side, to act as a facade for the time being. One more thing, now his father's captain of the bodyguard has been taken over by him. Because he failed to protect his father before, Felice blamed himself very much. In Carlo's view, this was not entirely the fault of the former captain of the guard. If the assassin put his own life and death at risk, it would be really hard to guard against, and more importantly, the current situation is Carlo lacked a man like Felice. Therefore, Carlo has an urgent need for the former captain of the guard. In addition, Baron Felicius, as his father's captain of the bodyguard, must be confirmed by his father in terms of loyalty and ability. Coupled with the guilt caused by his father's assassination, it is impossible to find a better candidate than him. Your Majesty, Mr. Cosenza is already here, Baron. Felicius walked into the room and told Carlo, who was busy with his head down, that someone had arrived. Carlo raised his head and asked, "Where to?" Avoid attention. I was placed in a back room, and Cosenza had no problem with that. See? This is professionalism. Carlo felt more and more that His Excellency the Baron was worthy of choosing the captain of the bodyguard for his father, and that he was able to arrange these small details in advance. Then, let's go there. Under the leadership of Felice, Carlo quietly came to the room, where Cosenza was located through his cover. Although it is in the palace, who knows who in the palace will tell the truth? After all, he has no real power now, and he lacks prestige as a king. Carlo also watched a lot of palace fighting dramas in his previous life, so it's better to be careful. As soon as Carlo entered the room, he saw the old man who had been standing next to Garibaldi before. "Hello, Mr. Cosenza. Thank you for visiting Rome in person. As a king, Carlo did not have the burden of being a king at all. He said hello without hesitation as soon as he entered the door, which made Cosenza feel very different. "Your Majesty, it is a pleasure to meet you." Unlike Carlo, Cosenza was more reserved of that era, and was very polite and courteous. "Please, take a seat, Mr. Cosenza. I can't continue the conversation if you stand. I don't think this meeting needs to be so formal." Seeing Cosenza standing in front of him meticulously, Carlo quickly asked the old man to sit down. After his persuasion, Cosenza also sat down. "Mr. Cosenza, I asked you to come to Rome this time. I believe you have heard a lot of rumors." Carlo's straight to the point words made Cosenza nod. It was only after he came to Rome that he understood the current situation. His Majesty had just been disgraced by Prime Minister Caroli. Although this news was only circulated in the upper class circles, Cosenza, as a personal representative, had his own news channels and knew about it. It was only after he learned about this incident that he felt that Garibaldi's self-awareness was really accurate. It is indeed not as simple as the letter. His Majesty Carlo really has the possibility of taking advantage of them. "I know a little bit, but I came here in a hurry and don't know the full story." Facing Cosenza's answer, Carlo was no exception, and saw him continue. "Do you need me to elaborate?" Carlo's words surprised Cosenza. He would not be surprised if these words came from an old politician, but it would be surprising enough to hear them from a young man. At the same time, he overturned the premature decision he had just made. Just like an old monster, Carlo didn't know that Cosenz thought so highly of him in his heart, but he knew that he needed to make Cosenz feel his sincerity next. It seems that you don't want to hear it. Well, this meeting with you is also a little selfish on my part. Mainly because I want to see the red shirt army back then. I admire the record of this army very much, and at the same time, I have great respect for their selfless. I would like to express my high respect for you. I wonder if you can satisfy this small request of mine. Confronted with Carlo's words, Cosenz replied, logically, I should agree to your majesty's request, but now there are no more red shirts, only law-abiding Italian citizens. And everyone has gone their separate ways in recent years, so it is extremely difficult to reunite them. Faced with Carlo's request, Cosenz refused without hesitation. Because the Red Shirt Army was originally just a title and had never been officially recognized, it was impossible for Cosenz to summon these people just because Carlo wanted to see it. Even Garibaldi would not agree. That's really regrettable, but since it will disturb their peaceful life, I'd better forget it. Carlo was also very easy to talk to, and Cosenz didn't mention it again after he refused. But although he didn't mention it anymore, he got stuck with Cosenz. I heard that Mr. Cosenz was originally from the Red Shirt Army, so can you tell me about your fighting situation at that time? There is no problem with this. As long as His Majesty wants to know, I will tell you everything. Faced with Carlo's new request, Cosenz did not refuse this time. Then, where do I begin? Let's start when you met Mr. Garibaldi. Okay, Your Majesty. I was still young at that time, only in my early 30s. Cosenz recounted his meeting with Garibaldi for several hours, from their first meeting to the subsequent battle. Carlo acted like a real teenager at this time, listening to his story quietly and asking questions from time to time when there were some unknown points, but Cosenz really knew everything. The two got along more and more harmoniously, and slowly Cosenz finally felt the side of Carlo as a teenager. But time passed quickly, and the voice of Felicity Mickey came from outside the door. Your Majesty, it's almost time. At this time, Carlo stood up and continued to talk. Thank you for your narration, which gave me a better understanding of that era. Is there another chance for us to meet next time? No problem, as long as Your Majesty is willing to listen to me. An old man, nagging. That's it. Looking at Carlo leaving, Cosenz felt that His Majesty was very interesting. Carlo walked to the door, suddenly turned around and said something. Mr. Cosenz, I think you are not old at all. You should still be able to fight for Italy for more than 10 years. After saying that, Carlo opened the door and left. Cosenz, who stayed in the room, looked at Carlo's leaving figure and whispered to himself, Your Majesty is really interesting. This was the end of this meeting that would affect Italy in the future. Although no results were achieved this time, the attitudes of the two parties have been clearly revealed. At least neither hates the other, which is good news for both parties. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15 Tesla is coming. After meeting with Garibaldi's personal representative, Carlo devoted himself to the construction of the R/U-0026D Center, during which his homework was also not left behind. Your Majesty, your history class is very good. I suggest you add history classes from other parts of the world. I don't know which area you want to choose. Far East. I like the history of the Far East. Carlo was having an after-class conversation with his history teacher after just finishing a class. Your Majesty, Domingo is back with the people you need. Baron Felicius quietly approached Carlo and whispered the news to him. New. After replying to Felicius, Carlo continued to talk to his history teacher. However, the history teacher was still very discerning and immediately left on the grounds that he had something else to do. Carlo waited until he sent his history teacher out the door and then calmly replied to Mickey, who was waiting aside. Now let's go meet Mr. Tesla. felt more and more that His Majesty was becoming more and more stable, and was able to do everything in an orderly manner, and was not impatient at all when faced with any news, becoming more and more like a monarch. In fact, not only Felicity Mickey felt this way, but even Carlo himself felt that he was getting more and more frustrated. Maybe this is the taste of power. Although he currently doesn't have much power, he is becoming more and more skilled at controlling others. In a reception room, Tesla was admiring the murals on the wall, while Domingo was explaining, "This is a mural done by Master Giordano in the last century. The mural is first class in terms of color and meaning, and fully meets the master's expectations. This is one of the few paintings he did in Rome." Well, for a scientist to talk about art, he knows everything from 7 to 6, but knows nothing about it. However, even ordinary people can feel the beauty of this harvest mural, so Tesla rarely responded. "It's really beautiful." Now, Tesla no longer hates Domingo. After he woke up and said what he didn't finish, Domingo knew that he had made a mistake. Since there was a misunderstanding, it was natural to make amends. On the way back, Domingo worked hard to let Tesla experience the life of the upper class as a royal attendant. He still had plenty of service people at his fingertips, and Tesla's attitude toward Domingo also changed from dissatisfied to calm to friendly. By the time they arrived in Rome, the two were already half friends. Tesla was also looking forward to meeting Carlo, and his desire to become friends with the king became stronger and stronger. While the two were studying the mural, the door was opened. Carlo walked in with a happy expression on his face. "Hello, Mr. Tesla, I'm Carlo. I apologize for the misunderstanding caused by Domingo." As soon as Carlo came in, he greeted Tesla preemptively, and at the same time he also drew in the relationship between the two, as if they had known each other for a long time. Tesla, who was speechless because of Carlo's enthusiasm, could only reply immediately, "Hello, Your Majesty Carlo, nice to meet you." In fact, he wanted to ask if we had known each other before. "Mr. Tesla, don't be nervous. Just treat me as a friend. Usually my friends call me Carlo." "Does Carlo have any friends?" "Not really, but now there is. Thank you, Your Majesty." "No, thank you Carlo for your warm hospitality. I'm no longer angry about that misunderstanding." Compared with Carlo, Tesla seemed more excited and never thought about becoming friends with the king. Seeing that Tesla was no longer obsessed with being kidnapped, Carlo got down to business. "Your Excellency Tesla, my friends call me Nicolay." Faced with Tesla's small correction, Carlo changed his tune as usual. "Okay, Nicolay, I'm asking you to come this time because I want you to help me. I'm currently building an electrical R/U0026D center, but I'm missing a person in charge, and you happen to be excellent in electrical, so I'd like to ask you come to host this research and development center. Of course, in terms of remuneration, I will not let my friends suffer. The conditions agreed to you in the letter shall be based on this." Carlo's words moved Tesla very much, not least because his interest in electrical research caught His Majesty's eye so much. Although he didn't know where Carlo learned about his ability in electrical research, running a research and development center made Tesla so fond of him. He felt like he was under too much pressure. "Excuse me, where is this R/U0026D center, and how big is it?" "Currently, I have chosen Mirino, a suburb of Rome, where there is Lake Albano. The environment is very beautiful and is suitable for a RA/U0026D center. In addition, as for the scale you are concerned about, my current plan is to be able to accommodate 300 people for electrical R/U0026D. Absolutely, it is the largest R/U0026D center of its kind in Europe." Carlo's words surprised Tesla. He didn't expect it to be so big. I saw him waving his hands directly after Carlo finished speaking. "Your Majesty, although I really want to be the head of this R/U0026D center, I still have a very clear understanding of myself. I simply cannot be the head of such a large R/U0026D center. I have never managed a single person before. However, please take back this decision." Yes, although Tesla considers himself capable, how dare he accept it if he is asked to directly manage such a large R/U0026D center? If nothing else, Tesla is still unknown, so what can he do to convince others? Without results, all kinds of worries can prevent him from working. Besides, Europe's largest electrical research and development center is a highly visible location, and you won't be able to cause a stir if you go up there. Who do you think you are? How can you take on this important task? Faced with Tesla's refusal, Carlo showed a surprised expression. I've always reserved this position for you, and I think you're a good fit. It really doesn't work. You'd better find another person in charge. I really don't have the qualifications to take on this position now. After Tesla repeatedly refused, Carlo could only reluctantly accept his request. Okay, since you refused, Nicholas, I'm looking for someone else. But is it okay for you to be the person in charge of one of the projects? That's fine. I wonder if you think I can be the person in charge of that project. Tesla accepted Carlo's suggestion and asked what project it was. Facing Tesla's inquiry, Carlo said seriously, although the electrical R/U0026D center is currently under construction, when I see these new technologies, I think the current self-current used by everyone is not very good, and the transmission distance is too short. The power generation equipment must be built nearby, which is not conducive to promotion, so I'm optimistic alternating current. So I hope you can be responsible for developing practical alternating current technology. There is no problem with this. I just want to test whether the knowledge I have learned is enough. Seeing Tesla agreeing, Carlo immediately laughed. This time the act did not run away. Chapter 16 Dark Cloud Surge. Not to mention Carlo starting a new business and building his own electrical research and development center. If you want to ask who is the most proud in Rome at the moment, it has to be Prime Minister Carlo. The Prime Minister's experience can be considered a bumpy one. In his early years, he participated in the Italian independence movement with his 4 brothers. He was the only one who survived to see the unification of Italy. In addition, Carlo participated in Garibaldi's 1,000-man expedition, and later made military exploits in the battle to capture Palermo. But later he parted ways with Garibaldi. He participated in the parliamentary election, successfully became a parliamentarian, and served as prime minister for a period of time, but resigned because he failed to win back South Tyrol. This is his second time as prime minister, but this time he is lucky. After only 1 year as prime minister, the king died due to an assassination. Amelia, the regent who represented the royal family, had a reputation for being a romantic person. In less than 3 months, his reputation spread throughout Rome. As long as he was in politics, no one with a burden would place their hopes on the regent. As for the other speaker, His Excellency, it is not worth mentioning. So now, Prime Minister Carlo is considered the most powerful person in Italy. In this case, the Prime Minister's office, where he is located, naturally has many people trying to share some power. This also caused traffic jams in front of the Prime Minister's office, and a large number of people who wanted to see him queued from the door to Caesar Square. However, there are not many people who want to be seen by the Prime Minister, so even those who can get an interview with him attract attention. There are even rumors that the Prime Minister is harder to see than the king. Carlo doesn't care about this. He doesn't care what the outside world says about him, because he has more important things to do. In the room, Carlo was busy checking the work at hand. The beautifully decorated alarm clock in one corner was ticking and turning its hands, making the quiet Prime Minister's room look a little special. After reading a document, Carlo pressed the alarm, and someone came over immediately. Have someone return this document to the transportation department and tell them that the railway project from Palermo to Messina needs to be redone. What are they doing? A short 240 kilometers of railway line actually costs 4,001 lira. Do they think the government has too much money? Seeing the furious Prime Minister, as his secretary, was so angry that he did not dare to speak out. He quickly took the returned document and had it sent to the Public Works Department. After seeing his secretary go out, Carlo rubbed his swollen temples to calm down the anger in his heart. At present, he is experiencing the pleasure of monopolizing power, and naturally he is also enjoying the pain. Currently, he has to make decisions on everything big and small. The huge workload has made his temper worse and worse, and he gets angry and scolds people at every turn. This makes the staff in the Prime Minister's office cautious, but although the Prime Minister's temper is getting worse, no one wants to leave because of it. The Prime Minister's office is already a high and powerful position, but if you just say that you work in the Prime Minister's office, everyone will look up to you. Even the ministers have been very kind to them recently. Only a fool would give up his future because of such a trivial matter. After Caroli was busy for a while, he felt a little lack of energy, so he rang the alarm bell and called his secretary. "Dos, get me a cup of coffee." "Yes, Your Excellency." After taking in the sweet and bitter coffee, Caroli felt much better. However, he did not continue working, but sat on the sofa to take a rest. As his secretary, Dos, of course, stood aside and waited for his orders at any time. "By the way, Dos, how many people I invited to the party tonight have agreed?" Caroli was drinking coffee and casually asked about other things. Although Caroli asked casually, Dos paid considerable attention. "Your Excellency Prime Minister, most of the guests on the list have agreed to attend on time. Only Secretary of Commerce and Trade Gilitis and Minister of Agriculture Mark Ryder declined politely because they were not feeling well. In addition, Mr. Desperatus he refused directly because he didn't want to participate." Dos's words caused Caroli, who was drinking coffee, to pause. The Prime Minister's secretary felt something and immediately held his breath. For a moment the only sound in the room was the ticking of the pendulum point. It seemed like a long time passed before His Excellency the Prime Minister put down his coffee and said something after a long time. "If Desperatus doesn't want to participate, then he won't participate." As a secretary, Dos did not dare to answer the Prime Minister's words. These two are both big guys, and if they are not careful, they will destroy this little shrimp like him. It's a long story to say that Desperatus, who even the Prime Minister has nothing to do with him, can do anything to anyone. His full name is Agostino Desperatus, and he graduated from law school in Pavia. He once worked as a journalist, supported Mazzini's Republican ideas in his early years, and joined the Young Italy Party. However, in 1848, he was elected as a member of the Piedmont Parliament, gave up his Republican views, and began to publish Justice to promote the idea of a constitutional monarch. In 1859, he was appointed governor of Reggio. In 1860, he went to Sicily to assist Garibaldi in his work. He dealt with crispy Democrats and Cava liberals, tried his best to implement the Cava route, and promoted the merger of Sicily and the Kingdom of Piedmont. Caroli was much better. He participated in the cabinet twice in 1862 and 1866, serving as Minister of Public Works, Minister of the Navy and Minister of Finance. Since 1873, he has become a left-wing leader representing the interests of the financial, industrial, bourgeoisie and large landowners. Moreover, Desperatus has served as Prime Minister for 2 terms, and is Caroli's biggest competitor. It can be said that heretics are more hateful than heretics. In addition, I would like to say that most of the currently active politicians in Italy have participated in Garibaldi's expedition to Sicily. Logically speaking, they should all be considered comrades in arms, but power is too tempting, and even the love of comrades in arms cannot resist the temptation. Prime Minister Caroli stopped talking and just drank the coffee in front of him quietly. However, as Secretary Dos, he felt that the current Prime Minister was very scary, but his duties as secretary told him that he must continue to wait. After finally finishing the coffee, Caroli suddenly asked Dos, who was cleaning up, "By the way, how is Our Majesty doing now?" Faced with the inquiry, Dos cleared the table again and again while answering. "Currently, apart from attending classes, His Majesty is busy working on the experimental center built by Marino. I heard that this experimental center will cost 20 million lire and will support 300 people in scientific research and development after it is completed." Very well, it would be nice to let His Majesty find something to do. After Caroli finished speaking, he couldn't help but sigh. The royal family is really rich. Chapter 17 Spectators. When asked whether the Savoy family has money, 9 out of 10 Italians will tell you that they do, and 1 will tell you that they are very rich. As a wealthy Savoy family, they have the ability to do something on their own without relying on the government. This is why Carlo felt confident to go it alone after the government disagreed. Although he currently does not have power, He does not lack financial resources, so where is Carlo now? He is currently inspecting Merino's scientific research center on a fenced-in construction site by Lake Albano. Carlo was watching the construction progress on the construction site with the site leader, the future leader, and Tesla. The buildings on this construction site are generally small buildings with 3 or 4 floors. The only one that is taller is the future complex building. Even this complex building is only 5 stories high. There is no difficulty in construction. Along the way, the construction manager kept explaining to them the functions of their respective buildings. When they arrived at a 4-story building, the person in charge pointed at key and said, "This is a laboratory prepared for high-frequency currents, and the building next to it is a power room equipped for power generation." Although the person in charge of the construction did not know what these words meant, Tesla was knowledgeable. He looked at the building covered with wood and linen in front of him with great interest. Carlo took a look at Tesla's performance and asked, "How's the progress so far?" "Progress is going well, and the buildings are expected to be delivered in another 3 months." The words of the construction leader satisfied Carlo. Although in later generations such a building could be repaired in more than a month. But considering that times are different, it's pretty good to be able to complete it in 5 months. There was nothing going on in the construction site. Carlo, Tesla and his team came out after staying at the construction site for an hour. Although Tesla didn't show much, Carlo felt that he liked it here very much. "Do you like it?" "Yes, this is a good place. The environment is very beautiful. It is perfect for vacation. It would be a waste to use it for scientific research." Tesla's comments made many people laugh secretly. They didn't expect this person to be so humorous. "You are wrong, Mr. Tesla. It is a waste to use it for vacation. Use such a beautiful environment for scientific research." Carlo's words moved many people. They didn't expect His Majesty to value care so much. In this era, where men are used as cattle, women as men, and children as women, there is still a king who values people so much. This is the result of improvements after the revolution of 1848. Before, men were treated as machines, women were treated as livestock, and children were treated as men. Many workers did not live past 40 years old. Although European countries are currently investing in science, except for particularly famous scientists, the living conditions of other scientific researchers are not that high, and they are generally only enough for one family. After inspecting the construction site, Carlo and Tesla walked around Merino. Life in a small town was just pleasant. Because it is close to Rome, the town grows many fruits, vegetables, and flowers, giving it a pastoral atmosphere. Tesla was okay, but Carlo felt like he could just live like this when faced with such an atmosphere. "Perhaps we can build a manor here and feel the atmosphere of life when we have free time." When it was time to leave, Carlo couldn't help but have this thought in his mind. But when he thought that he was only 15 years old and it was too far away to talk about pastoral retirement life, he quickly gave up the idea. It was quite fast to return to Rome from Merino, arriving in Rome in an hour and a half. After sending Tesla to the University of Rome, Carlo was ready to return to the palace. Currently, because the scientific research center is still under construction, Tesla is using the equipment of the University of Rome to conduct research on electricity. After returning to the palace, Carlo first said hello to his mother, then looked at his brothers and sisters, and then went to his room. Although today's inspection was not long, Carlo was extremely happy, because it represented his first influence on Italy in this era. Although it was made using family funds, it also represented the first step in a long journey of thousands of miles. But before he could rest, Baron Filmicki arrived. Carlo currently attaches great importance to the former captain of the guard, because he found that the Baron is very useful, and one of the few talents he can use. And Filmicki is also very good enough to complete the tasks assigned by Carlo, and it is the same this time. "Your Majesty, I have already found out the information you asked me to check." Carlo's spirits were lifted by Filmicki's words. "Tell me, how many people have not accepted the Prime Minister's invitation?" Last night, 3 people rejected the Prime Minister's invitation. Among them, Secretary of State for Commerce and Trade Gillites and Minister of Agriculture Mark Ryder refused due to various physical reasons. Carlo's eyes lit up when he heard this. What about the actual situation? According to what we know, these two ministers have not been feeling unwell recently, and they are still working and receiving guests today. After receiving such good news, Carlo felt that he had a good day today. Then who is the other person? Your Excellency Depretis. He refused directly because he did not want to participate. Depretis. Yes, Your Majesty. This is really good news for me. Very happy to see Carlo. The former guard captain continued to provide the latest news. In addition, today, the news of Depretis' break with the Prime Minister spread throughout the city of Rome. Then, does anyone speak up to clarify? No, neither of the two parties involved came forward to speak. Then, this is interesting. Carlo thought about the reason. Monsieur Baron, what do you think is the reason for this? Faced with Carlo's inquiry, Philimaki spread his hands and said, Your Majesty, I don't know. Because of this matter, without more sources, I dare not make a decision. It doesn't matter. Just tell me your judgment and let me think about it. I don't think this can be fake. Where's the judgment? Because this will cause division. In fact, both of them currently have the same political support. However, Prime Minister Caroli has better luck. At this special time, Depretis does not want to see the other party gain too much support. Big rights. Although Philimaki spoke in a rather obscure way, Carlo understood. That is, when the new king was unable to grasp the power, the regent gave up his power on his own initiative, resulting in the now astonishing power of the Prime Minister. And the key point is that the Prime Minister can be replaced. So someone took the initiative point. However, although Carlo knew this, it had nothing to do with him, and no one would come to him again on this issue. Even if they were looking for him, it would be his uncle, the Duke of Aosta. After all, the regent could at least give them a name point. Carlo also knew this, but he was a little unwilling to give up like this. Is there no other way? Yes, you are at least 3 years older. Then, there is still no way point. Although Philimaki had no choice, it didn't mean that Carlo was going to give up. He thought of a candidate, and as long as he supported him, he would be able to do the same point. Just do it. Thinking of this, Carlo immediately prepared to continue writing letters. As long as the national hero supports him, he can still increase his sense of existence. Chapter 18 Garibaldi's thoughts. The leisurely life on the island of Caprera was once again interrupted by Carlo's letter. Looking at this letter with young handwriting, Garibaldi regretted his previous response to the young monarch. Seeing the old man's headache expression, Cosence's expression became interesting. What's the matter, old man? His Majesty the King. Is he bothering you again? Yes, you are right. Now I regret sending you to Rome. Garibaldi's answer made Cosens laugh. Being able to make Garibaldi impatient was considered a skill, so I should thank him. Hey, old friend, whose side are you on? I'm on my side. Cosence's answer made Garibaldi look distressed. Okay, old man, I don't know you yet. If I really offended you, you would have thrown away this letter, even if it is a letter from the king. Cosence's attitude of I have already seen through your true nature made Garibaldi dissatisfied, and he turned his head and shouted towards the house. Loke, you will cook for the two of us tonight. Mr. Cosens, I don't plan to eat here today, because I have something to do. Okay, sir. Loke's answer came from inside the room. Old bastard, I never said that. After hearing what Garibaldi said, Cosens would not do what he wanted. Loke, I want to eat here today. I have a good appetite today, and can eat enough for 2 people. Got it, Mr. Cosens. After hearing Loke's answer, Cosens looked victorious, making Garibaldi's teeth itch with anger. But joking aside, business still had to be dealt with. Cosens put away his expression, and asked with a serious face, then what are you going to do? I have no idea, but after seeing the still confused expression, Garibaldi explained that King Carlo has always wanted to mess with my old bones, but I really have no plans to go out now. Moreover, my era has passed, and I don't want to attract attention again, because it will make too many people uneasy. Cosens believed Garibaldi's words were the voice of an old friend, but he also noticed the wording. That was him, not them. Old man, it's not good for you to do this. Don't you want to give up on us? Garibaldi was very candid in the face of Cosence's questioning. "I'm sorry, this is my selfishness. I can't let you keep accommodating me. This is unfair to you." Garibaldi said this, paused and continued. "Do you still remember what you said about the young monarch after you came back from Rome? How could you not remember that at a young age? He is as mature as his father." "Actually, I think so too, but His Majesty is now pursuing us. If we don't give him some benefits, he won't let us go." "Then what?" After hearing his friend's answer, Garibaldi looked at him without speaking. He was a little confused by his actions, but Cossense was not stupid, and he suddenly reacted. "So you send me to Rome, you treacherous fellow. You're not stupid, Cossense." Garibaldi burst into laughter as he spoke. Although he was deceived by Garibaldi, Cossense had a lot of questions in his heart that he wanted to ask, but now he asked the question that he wanted to ask the most. "Have you ever met King Carlo before? How do you know his character so well?" Intuition. Garibaldi's words made Cossense look like he wanted to hit someone. It was really intuitive. "I had a feeling at the funeral that this child was special. When the enthronement ceremony took place, the feeling became even stronger. It felt like I was watching a younger version of the old king. So when I received his letter at the first moment, I had the idea of being targeted. In order to make this king give up, I pushed you out. Old friend, you won't blame me." Facing Garibaldi's sincere words, Cossense didn't know what to say. In fact, he knew in his heart that this was just Garibaldi trying to find a way out for the remaining red shirts. However, in order to take into account their self-esteem, they put more responsibility on themselves. "Garibaldi, you still have such a temper. You put everything on yourself." Cossense looked at his old friend and sighed involuntarily. When facing Cossense, Garibaldi waved his hand and said, "It's nothing. I owed it to the boys before. They followed me to fight on the battlefield, but I couldn't give them any explanation." Cossense knew that what Garibaldi was talking about was that he had called for volunteers several times before and then dismissed them when they were used up. He believed that he needed to explain to these followers that the young king was now a good opportunity, so he hoped to find a way out for them. "Actually, you don't have to be such an old man. We are all voluntary, and we don't want to pursue rewards. Otherwise, we would have left long ago like Depretis and others." Garibaldi is very clear about what Cossense means. The red shirts who are still supporting him are indeed the kind of people who do not ask for anything in return. It is precisely this that makes him feel a little guilty about this. "Don't persuade me, Cossense. I know this, but I must give them an explanation. You are my most trusted friend. Can you take good care of them?" Hearing Garibaldi's somewhat like Tuogu words, Cossense was a little surprised, and at the same time he felt a little bad inside. "What's the matter, old man? Are you hiding something from me?" "No, absolutely not. It's just that recently I think about my comrades who fought for me before, and I feel a little sorry for them." Although Garibaldi gave an explanation, Cossense still felt that something was wrong, because his words really seemed to be bullying. Although he stopped asking questions, he paid attention to Garibaldi's condition. "There are more rage spots on my face than before. My waist is more hunched, and my energy is much weaker than before." These discoveries made Cossense realize that this national hero had reached the end of his life. At this moment, Cossense no longer wanted to argue with him. The changes in Cossense's expression were all observed by Garibaldi. "Why? I feel like I'm too old to walk anymore." "No, why not? Your thoughts are written all over your face. You thought I couldn't find it. You guys are still so stubborn. I really shouldn't care about you. I don't need others to care about me anymore. I don't need it at all. Ever since I started running a boat, I knew that I was in good health and could live at least 99 years. Cossense, who was amused by Garibaldi's words, looked at the man in front of him and felt so shameless for the first time. "Forget it. I can't help you. Just do whatever you want." With that, he left the garden. "Wait, you remember to go to Rome. I don't want to be disturbed by that king." "I know, it's very annoying." After seeing his old friend agree, Garibaldi smiled like an old naughty boy. Chapter 19, Making Peace. In Rome, the topic about Prime Minister Caroli and former Prime Minister Depretis is the most eye-catching. Of course, this topic is still only circulated among officials, and ordinary people have not had the opportunity to learn about it, but I believe that it will be a while. In time, the conflict between the two will inevitably be known to everyone. During this period, there were also people who worked hard to mediate it, but these people were basically from left-wing political parties, but even many of them had other ideas. In addition, there are more people watching the excitement and waiting to fish in troubled waters, and these people have different thoughts anyway. As the conflict between the Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister became public, it was like a huge stone falling into the water, which immediately caused a storm, and everyone was waiting for the next plot point. Baron Filmic was walking briskly down the aisle of the Palazzo Quirinal, and everyone else nodded to him along the way. "Hello, Your Excellency, Captain of the Guard." "Hello, that's right." Filmic became the captain of the guard again. Although Queen Mother Margherita was resentful of his role in her husband's assassination, Carlo decided to continue to make Filmic his captain of the bodyguard. The past few months of getting along with each other made Carlo feel the ability of Felicity Mickey. Although he had failed to protect his father, he could not be entirely blamed for this. All evidence afterwards pointed to the fact that this was an isolated incident that was determined to make big news. This situation is very bad because it is unorganized and purely an individual behavior, with no way for people to get warning in advance. In addition, various accidents were caused at the time, so this tragedy occurred. Of course, Gabriel C., who dared to assassinate the king, has been executed on charges of assassinating the monarch and endangering the lives of others, but this matter has passed. The hottest thing now is the dispute between the Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister, and Filmic brought the latest situation. The monarchy system in the Far East is very different from ours, and its bureaucracy is much more severe than ours. Although this ensured the status of institutional culture in the region in the previous era, it seriously affected external development. This is both its advantage and disadvantage. The monarch has too much power, which requires very high ability of the monarch. It is obvious that excellent monarchs cannot always exist, so the light of civilization has not been born in the Far East. In addition, they lack religious knowledge. It is also the biggest regret that an excellent religion like Catholicism has not taken root in this region. Carlo rubbed his temples with his hands while listening to Professor Esther's passionate narration on the podium. Yes, this description of China's history, which is full of errors, was made by Italy's best Far Eastern scholars. Now Carlo regrets studying the history of the Far East. He originally thought he would look at the same problem from a different perspective, but even the best researcher of Far Eastern history in Italy came up with all kinds of ridiculous conclusions, and he still had to let him. Putting on an expression of listening with great interest is really making it difficult for him to block someone. "Professor, have you been to China?" Carlo suddenly asked this question, which shocked Professor Esther, who was telling the story. "Sorry, Your Majesty, I have never been to China." "Sure. Enough." But before Carlo could continue to ask, Professor Esther, who seemed to know what he was thinking, continued. "However, although I have never been to China, I have studied the complete history of the Chinese Empire by Father Du Heed, General History of China by Feng Gang, and History, Geography, Literature, and Materials of the Great Empire of China by Bourdieu. I have also contacted missionaries and diplomats in China, and obtained first-hand information and documents from them." Well, in Professor Astor's view, studying Chinese history only requires books and oral narrations from others. In fact, in Europe, the study of China is still unpopular. If Carlo hadn't wanted to study the history of the Far East on a whim, then this foreign historian working at the University of Rome would not have been able to enter the Quirinal Palace. In addition, compared with the beauty that comes from distance in the 18th and early 19th centuries, the current European concept of the Far East is an image of backwardness and barbarism. For Europeans, even America, which is in the same civilization, is a backward existence, let alone a different civilization. The Confucian culture of the Far East. Although Professor Esther said so much, Carlo still felt that something needed to be said. "Have you ever wanted to go to China?" "Of course I want to see it, if I have the chance." Faced with Carlo's inquiry, Professor Esther certainly had this idea. I'm studying the history of the Far East myself, but it makes no sense that I have never been there. But when you think about the intermediate costs, this is not friendly at all. Not to mention the time it takes to go to the Far East. The cost alone is a headache. Professor Esther himself has calculated that the ship fare alone will cost at least 3,000 lire, not to mention other expenses. If the total does not add up to 7 or 8,000 lire, it is simply not enough. In addition, how should he calculate the cost of living in China and other expenses? It's what restricted his thinking. If the professor has this idea, then the royal family can support you with 15,000 liras of funds. Carlo's words moved Professor Esther, but considering the current courses, he hesitated. Thank you for your kindness, Your Majesty, but in this case, regarding your courses, it doesn't matter. There's nothing to worry about. The key is whether you are willing to accept the funding. Professor Esther was really moved by Carlo's words. Thinking of his status as a king, it was easy to re-invite a teacher. Then, thank you for your generosity. I'm very happy to go to the Far East to see it with my own eyes. Who could refuse such an opportunity? Especially Professor Esther. Carlo breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the excited Professor Esther. After sending the professor away, he had no intention of hiring another scholar who studied Far Eastern history. Getting along with Professor Esther made him understand that he and those scholars who studied Far Eastern history were not in the same pot. If he hadn't considered his own image, it would be very bad to fire Professor Esther directly, so he wouldn't have spent 15,000 lire to send him away. Fortunately, this person knew what he was doing, which saved him a lot of trouble. However, if he knew that Professor Esther advertised that he was Carlo's teacher everywhere, he would probably want to beat him. Well, now he doesn't know. At this moment, Felimaki, the captain of the guard, came over. Your Majesty, something is urgent. Is it urgent? Yes. After apologizing to Professor Esther, Carlo changed rooms. Tell me, what's the matter? The Prime Minister, His Excellency Caroli, and the former Prime Minister, Mr. Despotis, have just reached an agreement that Mr. Despotis will no longer seek the position of Prime Minister. What? Chapter 20 The Prime Minister's Reflections. Carlo was very surprised by Felimaki's words. Felimaki showed a very understanding expression of surprise when facing Carlo. He was not much better than Carlo when he got the news. Because this news is a sudden storm for the current Roman political circle. Is the news reliable? Reliable, Carlo pondered after hearing Felimaki's answer. If this is the case, it is not what he and many people want to see. Is it impossible to change anymore? It should be impossible to change. According to the intelligence, Femilit and Earl Berwick visited these two people last night. After that, the two people agreed to stop all actions against each other. Carlo knew both of them. Femilit was a famous Italian capitalist. The shipping company he founded accounted for 10% of Italy's shipping, which shows his weight. In addition, he also opened the largest textile factory in Italy in Milan, with 1,800 workers. If there were a rich list, Mr. Femilit would be in the top 3. As for the Earl of Berwick, this person is not as rich as Femilit, but he owns a considerable piece of land in southern Italy, and he also has great influence in the local area. The reason for all this is that Earl of Berwick was an important minister of the country during the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. When Italy was unified, in order to reduce resistance from local areas, the nobles of the Kingdom of Two Sicilies were mainly attracted. Although this accelerated the pace of Italian unification, it also left many problems. But before that, Carlo had met the two gentlemen before, and he still remembered how they looked when they met his father. Unexpectedly, after the temporary loss of royal power, they quickly adapted, and each found a new position. Of course, Carlo didn't want to blame them, who caused the current royal power to be temporarily lost. They would only follow the footsteps of power. However, this news was not very good for him. Thinking of this, Carlo couldn't help but ask, do you know what agreement they reached? This is unclear, because no outsiders were present when they were discussing, and our spies couldn't get in at all. Felic's words reminded Carlo of a very important question, and he asked it directly. How many people know this news now? The people who know now should be limited to a few people, but in 2 days the two will appear together in a meeting, and then everyone will know. 2. Days, 2 days. Carlo thought for a while, but in the end he couldn't think of any good way to achieve a favorable situation for himself in the past 2 days. In the final analysis, it is still because of your age. It is difficult to gain the trust of others at the age of 15 or 16, unless the other party understands you well enough. Speaking of understanding, Carlo couldn't help but think of Mr. Cosenz, the Garibaldi envoy. Maybe I should write another letter to Garibaldi. While Carlo was lamenting that the storm had subsided, some people were also blaming themselves in the Prime Minister's office. Everyone is doing their own thing carefully and quietly. Such a busy and quiet scene is extremely weird, but there is a reason for all this, and the reason is very simple. The owner of this house needs to be quiet. In the Prime Minister's office, Carolee sat quietly on the sofa and meditated quietly. There was no other sound in the room, except the sound of the pendulum. Wow, the match lit the pipe, and the smoke in the pipe covered Carolee's uncertain face. After a long time, he sighed. It was a bit extreme before. Yes, Carolee now regrets some of his previous actions. After the regent left him alone, he suddenly found that he was the most powerful person in Italy. Faced with the huge power he suddenly gained, he was lost. He regarded himself as the master of Italy, and this move brought him many benefits and consequences. The good thing is that he is in the government now, and he says the same thing, but the bad thing is that he has added many enemies to himself. Of course, there are only a few people such as former Prime Minister Despotis on the surface, but he believes that just like the icebergs on the sea, there are more hidden points. Fortunately, he realized it in time. Otherwise, what would have happened once the fight between him and Despotis broke out in public? Point as for Femilit and Barrack, they just happened to meet each other. How could he choose to reconcile because of the persuasion of these two people? It was just his inner vigilance warning himself. And he locked himself up alone, just to reflect on his previous actions. After sorting out all his actions, Carolee put down his pipe. He already had an idea. He rang the bell, and Secretary Doss, who had been waiting outside, immediately opened the door and came in. Your Excellency, Prime Minister, what's the matter? Looking at the uneasy secretary standing in front of him, Carolee smiled. What's wrong, Doss? Am I scary? With Carolee's words, Doss felt that the familiar Prime Minister was back. No, my lord has always been nice. Well, I had some different ideas before, so I was a little harsh on you. Don't be surprised hearing the Prime Minister's apology to him. Doss felt that the Prime Minister he was familiar with was really back, which made Doss a little excited. Go and prepare for the meeting. I'm going to call the other ministers together for a meeting. Yes, Your Excellency Prime Minister. The sudden meeting did not make the other ministers busy at all. For them, the meeting was part of their work, so they rushed over quickly. After receiving the notice from the Prime Minister's office. After everyone was due, Carolee arrived as promised. Okay, let's have a meeting next. In this unimportant parliament, everyone discovered that the Prime Minister had changed and returned to the Prime Minister they were familiar with. Both his speech, behavior and attitude were back to what they were before. This unexpected parliament was an unusual success. No one expected the change of the Prime Minister. Both confidants and potential dissidents needed time to face this new situation, so this meeting was unusually successful smoothly. After the meeting was over, Carolee sat in the main seat to rest. Your Excellency Prime Minister. Everyone else in this meeting was dumbfounded. After sending everyone else away, Secretary Dossing hurriedly walked in and talked about today's performance. Okay, stop talking. Carolee stood up. We still have a lot to do next. Speaking of this, Carolee thought of Carlo. He was confident of controlling these fellow ministers. As for His Majesty, I believe that, after expressing goodwill and showing respect, the young monarch will change his mind. Chapter 21. The tree wants to be quiet, but the wind doesn't stop. Time passed quickly and everything returned to its original track. After the Prime Minister softened his attitude, all the turmoil calmed down. Especially after the two attended a public meeting together and made an intimate gesture. People with strange thoughts pressed their thoughts. For a time, the city of Rome was calm and peaceful. On Carlo's side, life is still going on. In addition to studying courses every day, he is still in contact with Garibaldi. However, with little progress. Carlo clearly felt that Garibaldi was resistant to the royal family's wooing. It seemed that it would take a lot of energy and time to embrace this national hero, but he had enough time to wait. Go down point, so time slipped away quietly in such an environment, and the situation in Rome was calm again. In addition to the above things, Carlo is also paying attention to the scientific research center built by Marino. This is good news. Under Carlo's attention, the electrical R/U0026D center in Marino has made rapid progress and completed the construction task within 3 months. It has now entered the debugging period of the equipment. As long as the equipment is debugged, it can be used at any time for use. This news is really good for Carlo, and it heralds his first step in intervening in Italy. It was able to be built so quickly, of course. In addition to Carlo's urging, money played a greater role. With the royal family's guarantee, all funds were properly arranged, so the motivated workers quickly repaired the research institute center. This also shows that the power of money can make people progress, even for people who are lazy by nature. Of course, the cost is not low. The cost list of 12 million lire was placed in front of Carlo. After taking a look at the list, Carlo said with satisfaction to the tall and thin old man in front of him, "Thank you, sir, your Majesty, you're welcome. This is just what I should do." The knight Carlo refers to as Alleged, the palace steward. This person, who is usually very inconspicuous in the palace and is easily ignored, has the financial power of the royal family. This shows his status in the heart of the royal family. This Alleged has worked for the royal family for decades, assisted 3 generations of the family, and can be trusted to control the royal family's finances. This shows his ability. Although Alleged didn't have many outstanding financial achievements, he was tight-lipped and willing to be lonely. Who wouldn't want someone who can quietly take care of the royal family's assets when he is not needed, and who can always have money ready when needed? And on these 2 points, Alleged did an especially good job, so he became one of the most trusted people by his grandfather and father, and now Carlo is also very satisfied with him. He always only obeys the king's orders, does not ask, gives advice when needed, and does things silently when not needed. He is simply the perfect financial power holder. Your Majesty, will you still need funds in the near future? No. Need. Thank you. Then, let me allocate funds to do other things. Go ahead. Looking at the palace steward leaving, Carlo looked at the captain of the guard beside him and asked, "By the way, when will the research center be opened?" Yes. Now Carlo can't wait to see the electrical experimental center start working on the electrification of Italy. Your Majesty, it will take at least 7 days to move in. Well, let the recruited scientific researchers start working in 7 days. At present, the electrical R/U0026D experiment center has recruited more than 200 people, including not only Italian technical personnel, but also electrical R/U0026D talents recruited from various European countries. That's right, Carlo will not only recruit Italian electrical R/U0026D personnel. Currently, any well-known European electrification research personnel will receive an invitation from Italy. Moreover, the remuneration is favorable, generally 50% higher than their current salary, which makes many people excited. At present, dozens of such people have been recruited from various countries, and half of the reasons are for the generous salary. Of course, this trick was also learned by Carlo from well-known companies in later generations. This approach is still effective in later generations, and it is naturally unfavorable now. Of course, Carlo still feels a little slow in the R/U0026D center alone. The main reason is that now is a great time for electrification research. He is not willing to let Italy miss the opportunity to get to the top position, so he needs to speed up. Therefore, Carlo also prepared a way, which is to use Italy's currently relatively good universities to conduct electrification research and development. He plans to fund well-known science and engineering universities such as the University of Rome and the University of Bologna to conduct in-depth research on electrification. Wait until you have results before sharing them with the school. Of course, the royal family who sponsors them gets the lion's share, but this is also very beneficial to the school, and I believe no one will refuse. This kind of experience is not uncommon in later generations. It has already been ruined, but now I believe these universities have not experienced it. But these are all successful experiences. I believe no one will have trouble with money. In Carlo's view, this kind of advanced scientific research experience is very necessary for Italy, which is currently lagging behind. In previous surveys, Italy's investment in scientific research was far from sufficient. At present, most of the investment in scientific research comes from the government, and private investment is very rare. This has a lot to do with the weak strength of Italian capitalists. For them, survival and growth are currently the first priority. Only when they have grown to a certain level will they have enough energy to shift funds to scientific research. But for Carlo, he couldn't afford to wait, and the capitalists' urinary nature made him afraid to put his hope in them. Apart from capitalists, the only thing left is government funding. However, everyone knows the financial situation of the Italian government. It is very difficult to expect them to spend large sums of money to support scientific research. The small amount of funds is like sprinkling pepper noodles. It is not enough to cover everything, so the funds can only be invested in more visible areas. Now that neither private individuals nor the government can rely on it, Carlo can only use royal funds to find a solution, so he attaches great importance to this. After all, only by making a good start can the situation be opened up later. By the way, Your Majesty, what do I need to prepare for then? Carlo was stunned by the words of the captain of the guard, and then he realized that he was asking who he invited to the opening ceremony of the R/U center. Carlo originally didn't want to invite people to participate. He just wanted to keep it simple, but now that the captain of the guard mentioned it, he felt that it was too low-key. After thinking about it, he replied, then just invite people from the government. Okay, Your Majesty, the Baron responded to Carlo's words, but since only people from the government were invited, then His Majesty did not want to make a big fuss, so at least ministers of various levels could participate. Thinking of this, he had an idea. The next day, invitation letters regarding the opening of the R/U 2026D test center in 6 days were handed to ministers and senior officials. Faced with the king's invitation, unless they really couldn't get away, they basically agreed. In the Prime Minister's office, Prime Minister Caroli looked at the invitation letter in front of him, was silent for a moment, and then answered to the secretary in front of him. Replied to the royal family, and I will attend on time, as you command, Your Excellency. When the Prime Minister responded that he wanted to attend, on the other side of Rome, former Prime Minister Despertus also received an invitation. Get ready. I need to attend His Majesty's invitation in Marino in 6 days. I need to dress more formally. Understood, sir. I will ask the tailor shop to prepare new clothes. Yes, Despertus planned to pick up the young monarch at the airport, but only he knew the reason. So in just one day, everyone in Rome was talking about His Majesty's ceremony. Of course, many people added some interesting things to talk about before and after tea. As for Carlo, he never thought that such a ceremony could become the focus. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22 Marino Laboratory opens. 6 days later, Marino ushered in the most solemn day of the year in the town. The experimental center located on the shore of Lake Albano was decorated with lights and colorful decorations. The carriage at the door made many people sigh that they had never seen so many big people in their lives as the mayor of the town. Mr. Orc stood at the door and nodded and bowed. As the town's sheriff Jarek, he also led his people to direct the incoming carriages to stop. Such a scene made other people in the town dare to watch from a distance and not dare to step forward at all. After a while, a carriage protected by a group of knights appeared. The carriage was decorated with a red and white cross with a crown that was unusually conspicuous, which made the residents of the town excited. Here we go. Get ready. As a police sergeant, Jarek quickly ordered his subordinates. In fact, he did not need to give orders, and his subordinates were already preparing to receive him in their best manner. Yes, Carlo was in the carriage, and he was in no mood to pay attention to Sheriff Jarek and his subordinates right now. Faced with a situation in which almost the entire core of Italy's political circle had arrived, he felt under great pressure. No matter how you look at it, this time it doesn't meet his low-key expectations at all. Not having already faced such a situation, he couldn't possibly back down. After giving himself confidence, Carlo got off the carriage. "Welcome, Your Majesty." After Carlo got off the carriage, there was a warm welcome. "Thank you all for coming to Mirino and participating in the opening ceremony of the Electrical Research Center." After applying to everyone present, Carlo immediately stepped forward and said to Prime Minister Caroli, who was at the front of the queue, "It is a great honor for the Prime Minister to come during today's opening ceremony despite his busy schedule. No matter where, this is all the credit of His Majesty. The previous government did not think carefully and did not think of the role of the R/U-00026D Center. This is a step down for the Prime Minister. After all, after the government refused, the royal family spent money to repair one. It is a slap in the face of the government, especially Caroli himself as the Prime Minister. But Carlo didn't have this idea. It wasn't that he didn't want to, and he couldn't point at present. All the power lies with the government. He does not want to make the relationship with the government too rigid, which is not good for anyone. There are people who do things that benefit oneself at the expense of others, and there are people who do things that harm others without benefiting oneself, but they definitely don't do things that harm others in self-interest. Now that Carlo has some political awareness, of course he won't do that. Moreover, with the Prime Minister's several previous goodwill gestures and his coming in person this time, Carlo is no longer in such a great mood. After chatting with the Prime Minister for a few words, Carlo immediately spoke to the bald old man beside him. "Mr. Depretis, I'm very glad that Your Excellency can come in person." Carlo still has great respect for the old man who has served as Prime Minister twice. This person is an old man in the political arena and is very likely to be his helper in the future, so he cannot be careless. His Majesty's move has strengthened Italy's research and development capabilities, which has a very good promotion effect on the kingdom, so I very much approve of His Majesty's move. Depretis. Words raised eyebrows in many people's eyes, because almost everyone present knew that the Prime Minister had deliberately snubbed His Majesty's proposal before, and Depretis' words were meant to slap the Prime Minister in the face. Therefore, many people showed playful expressions and planned to see how things would develop next. But what happened next disappointed them, and the Prime Minister said with a smile, "Mr. Depretis is right. His Majesty's move has strengthened Italy's technological research and development, and the government is very supportive of this. So I think the government can bear part of the subsequent research funding. This is a good idea, so I would like to thank the government for its generosity." The conversation between the three people disappointed the other people who were about to eat the melon. The scene did not show what they expected, but instead it was a peaceful situation. The Prime Minister is not angry at all, and the former Prime Minister has no follow-up. The young king has become a peacemaker instead, and his style of painting is weird. But no matter how weird the painting style is, the next thing still needs to be done. Carlo continued to greet the other arriving people one by one. "President Leslie, long time no see. Your Majesty Jagli, how have you been lately?" Mr. Gillets. After greeting many people, Carlo walked into the research center with the support of the Prime Minister and others. As the director of R/U-00026D, Argus now had the opportunity to walk to Carlo. "Although he is the host, Your Majesty, we are ready. Please come with me." The selection of a person in charge of the R/U-00026D center was delayed for a long time. There are simply no suitable candidates in Italy. Those who study electrical are basically learners. They can only take a few students to do research. It is very difficult to select suitable candidates. If there is no good choice at home, we can only look abroad. After some screening, Argus, who serves as the person in charge of technical management at Siemens, came into view. This Argus can serve as the technical director of Siemens. At least he is capable. In addition, he is also an Italian, which adds a lot of points to him. Although there are no clear rules, it is certainly the best option for an Italian to run the research center. So after some contact, the position of director of the R/U0026D Center was secured. Gentlemen, today, we invite His Majesty the King to give a speech to our research center in front of many guests and future employees at the scene. Argus, as the director, of course kept his story short. After all, the big shots were pressed for time and did not have so much free time to listen to his long speech. As Argus finished speaking, Carlo walked onto the stage to the applause. He looked at the people watching him and began a speech that would be recorded in history in the future. Gentlemen, good morning. I'm deeply honored to have you take part in this ceremony despite your busy schedule. This is not only an honor for me, but also an honor for Italy. Some people may ask why, so I will tell you. Because here is the most beautiful place in Italy. What is called hope? Yes, it is called hope. Who brings this hope? It is you. It is you scientific researchers who bring hope to Italy. Italy needs you to be rich and strong. So for a better, I hope you will work hard for Italy tomorrow. Carlo's words made the audience burst into applause and cheers. No one doesn't like to boast about his words, especially the monarch. At this moment, other people watching the ceremony applauded very appropriately. Your Majesty, this is a very good speech. It will make everyone more motivated. After Carlo stepped down, Tesla praised the king in front of him. He is very satisfied with his current life. He doesn't have to worry about life at all. He has a research life that he likes and has a king as his friend. It is simply perfect. I overrated Mr. Tesla, but I was just telling the truth. After Carlo finished speaking, the Prime Minister and the Minister of Education took the stage to deliver speeches respectively, but compared with Carlo's speeches, they felt a little inferior after the two of them finished talking. The Marino Electrical Test Center officially started working. Carlo and a group of people from the government also returned to Rome, and a friend happened to come to visit. Chapter 23: The Arrival of 1881. Mr. Cosenz, it's a pleasure to have your visit. He had just returned to Carlo and did not expect Cosenz to come, so he was very happy for the sudden visit because it meant that he could build a closer relationship between the two. Your Majesty, actually it's nothing. It's just that, after I arrived in Rome for something, I felt that it couldn't be justified not to pay a visit. Cosenz, who was wearing a dark dress, was sitting on the sofa, drinking coffee and answering like a friend. He knew that he was like this. The young king liked to see the most point. He was right, and Carlo was very satisfied. Do you need my help? No, it's just a small matter. Afterwards, the two chatted casually, and Carlo took the opportunity to ask about the Red Shirt Army's previous combat experience, allowing Cosenz to reminisce about the scene many years ago. In short, the chat between the two was very pleasant, and Cosenz and Carlo, the two old friends, were very satisfied with each other. But the visit came and went quickly. Cosenz left after less than an hour, and Carlo sent him away before returning to his office. Things finally came to an end today, and Carlo carefully recalled whether there were any mistakes in what he had done, and there seemed to be none. As for what former Prime Minister Depretis said today, it seems that he is helping Carlo, but the actual situation remains to be seen. He is not a 2 or 3 year old child. As long as others say a few words for him, he will like him. He needs to observe him again. The possibility of the two acting as a double act cannot be ruled out. Now Carlo doesn't know enough about the political world, so there's no harm in being cautious. But no matter what, it is a good thing for Carlo. As for now, of course he just needs to wait quietly. At this time there was a knock on the door. Come in. A slender hand pushed open the door, and an increasingly slim Naya appeared in front of him. Cough, cough. What's wrong with Naya? For some reason, Carlo felt more and more pressure as he looked at Naya, who was getting more and more dewy looking. If he hadn't felt suppressed by a mysterious force, he would have scooped this good cabbage into the bowl and let her wander around in front of him. Your Majesty, the Queen Mother asked me to call you. Okay, got it. As he spoke, Carlo couldn't help but reach out and hit Naya with a slap on the head. Your Majesty, Carlo, please pay attention. Naya felt that her hair was messed up again and couldn't help but complain. It felt so good, and Carlo, who was secretly happy in his heart, hated Xiaogui and left triumphantly. Elder brother. As soon as he reached the door, Carlo was immediately thrown to his side by two cuties. One of them hung on his thigh, making it difficult for Carlo to move even an inch. Hey, you're all here, aren't? The two sisters holding Carlo's thigh, Princess Yolanda and Princess Mafalda. There was a cough with a voice that had not completely transformed into a child, and Carlo saw that his brother Vittorio looked like a little adult. What's the matter, Vittorio? Something in your throat, you Carlos. Words made Vittorio unable to pretend anymore, waving his hands as if to drive Carlo away like a fly. Carlo, don't tease your brother like this. Look at this place becoming a market as soon as you walk in. Of course, the only one who can say this about Carlo is his mother, Queen Margherita. Queen Margherita, who is not yet 40 years old, is wearing dark clothes today and is sitting aside with her maid arranging her hair. Mom, what's wrong with calling me this time? Can't I call you if nothing happens? Of course. Carlo recalled that he had indeed spent less time with his brothers and sisters since he was crowned king. The main reason is that I'm too busy and need to familiarize myself with various situations in Italy. At the same time, I have to deal with those old foxes, so I have much less time left. In addition, the soul comes from the future life, and it always feels like there is some distance between it, and the reason why it is unwilling to face it is also one of the reasons. Brother, you haven't played with us for a long time. The two little princesses holding Carlo on the left and right looked at him eagerly, looking at the two cuties in front of him. Carlo felt like he was about to melt. He stepped forward to touch the two little princesses. It's my brother's fault for not being able to meet Yolanda and Mafalda. Hearing Carlo's words, the two little princesses put on expressions that you just know, making Carlo laugh out loud. While the two sisters were playing around for a while, they did not forget to quarrel with Vittorio, who was acting cool at the side. This scene comforted the mother on the side a lot. At the same time, she was worried when she thought that Carlo had to start fighting with those politicians at a young age. However, although she was a little worried, Margherita, who was born in the royal family, knew that this was an inevitable result. If you want to wear the crown, you must bear its weight, and this is not just talk. So she could only give her son some ways to relieve stress elsewhere. Don't think that she doesn't know the current situation in Rome. The Prime Minister's previous actions also made her very angry. However, it has always been difficult for women to perform well in the European political circle, and she is not a strong political woman. She has no idea about those things in the political circle. Not very interested. Fortunately, her son's performance satisfied her, and he did not behave excessively in any situation. While Carlo was spending time with his family, Carolee, who returned to the Prime Minister's office, was also thinking about today's events. What does this bastard Desperatus want to do? He actually did such a thing in public. Does he still want to jump out? He clearly remembered the somewhat slapping words the former Prime Minister said in front of the young monarch. Although in the eyes of politicians, face is worth a lot of money and can be sold by the pound. But it also depends on the timing. How long will it take after the two announce their reconciliation before the ex can't help but jump out again? Carolee has never considered whether this was an unintentional move. The reason is simple. Everyone is a big boss in the political circle and will not make such low-level mistakes. Moreover, even if it is really unintentional, it must be taken seriously. For this reason, he already had some preliminary ideas on his way back, and now it was time to sort them out. Thinking of this, Prime Minister Carolee looked gloomy and couldn't help but burst out. Let's see what you bastard wants to do then. I didn't do anything. I just wanted to express that the Prime Minister and I have different views. Desperatus, who also returned home, was talking with the arriving guests. However, seeing this somewhat fat visitor waiting for him, Desperatus couldn't help but sneer at him. Mr. Femilite, I didn't expect your nose to be so effective. Faced with Desperatus's ridicule, Femilite, a businessman, was not angry at all. Although he is a benefactor, there are also 3, 6, or 9 levels of benefactors. Among them, those who can provide huge amounts of funds and other help are considered the first level, followed by those who can provide funds and a small amount of help and are considered the second level. Only those who can be given funds will wait. Unfortunately, Femilit was ranked last in the eyes of Despotis. Of course, if you look at other officials, Femilit would be a top-notch benefactor. It's just that Despotis' level is too high, so in his eyes, Femilit can only be regarded as a pure cash machine. And Femilit was not dissatisfied with this. It's not easy to be a cash machine for a political boss. You don't have to have money to do it. You have to have the right eye. I haven't seen that in Rome. There are many people who have money, but can't find anyone to accept it. I just happen to be in Rome, and I'm just concerned seeing Femilit, who kept smiling with him. Despotis, who knew what he was thinking, gave him reassurance. Don't worry, there won't be any new fights, and it won't affect your business. After receiving the exact answer, Femilit nodded and bowed and left. He had great trust in what this political boss said. Of course, it would be okay if he didn't believe it. He didn't have the ability to change his mind. The follow-up was, just as the former prime minister said, except for expressing dissatisfaction in Mirino, there was no other action. This left the prime minister who was planning to fight back in the dark in vain. At the same time, it also disappointed many people who wanted to watch the show, as if Despotis really did it unintentionally. However, only the parties involved know what the problem is in such a strange environment. Time came to 1881, a new year began, and new hope came. Chapter 24. The wind rises. Paris, which exudes a romantic atmosphere, is so charming. As the largest city in the world, the people of Paris have enough reasons to be proud of it. Not to mention other places of interest in Paris. There are too many to count. Notre Dame, the Arc de Triomphe, the Louvre, the Palace of Versailles, etc. are simply too numerous to count. The Eiffel Tower has not yet been built, and the scenery along the Seine is comparable to the Ganges, but although the scenery of Paris is so charming, there are still many people on the street looking sad. It can be said that it is all dragged down by the economic situation, which makes life in France difficult at present. The current high unemployment rate in France is a huge challenge for the newly elected Joffeli government. This French figure, who is well known to many Chinese, is also forming a cabinet for the first time. The prime minister who has just taken office naturally needs a new government and a new atmosphere. First of all, he needs to provide solutions to the current economic situation. This Joffeli belongs to the Republican left and once served as the French Minister of Education and Foreign Minister. In terms of education, he first eliminated the influence of clergy in universities, and then he established a new education system. Joffeli also reorganized the Committee on Public Education and introduced a bill to change the university's governing charter. This was a huge impetus for France to establish free, secular, and compulsory primary education. In addition, he designated French as the language of instruction, which brought some dialects to the verge of extinction, and was later criticized by some people. However, Joffeli's decision also united people across France and consolidated the status of the French nation-state. If Joffeli has achieved outstanding results as Minister of Education, he has disgusted many people as Minister of Foreign Affairs. Speaking of which, this has a lot to do with his unusual diplomacy. He does not advocate direct confrontation with Germany, but is extremely interested in expanding colonies. This was completely contrary to the views of his political enemy Clemenceau. You must know that this man has an unusual dislike for Germany and wants to push France to regain Alsace-Lorraine. He can be regarded as a radical in France. The two men not only disagreed to the left on the issue of Germany, but also on the outside world. He believed that using violence to conquer uncivilized peoples would only reduce the moral prestige of the French nation. The government should not use France's vast manpower and material resources on colonial expeditions, but on various urgent domestic reforms. In his view, the colonial enterprise was only conducive to the enrichment of a few people and was not in the interest of France. But regardless of Clemenceau's objections, it is Joffeli who is now prime minister. The first task before him now is to find a way to make France satisfied with him. Among them, the ideas of the capitalists are easy to solve, but the needs of ordinary people are somewhat difficult. Of course, no matter how difficult it is, it needs to be done. Who makes him the Prime Minister of France? Joffeli has his own way to do this, but before that he needs to hold a meeting To discuss it. Looking at the cabinet members in the meeting, who were waiting attentively for his speech, Rufai began his speech. Everyone, we all know the purpose of convening a meeting. This is the first meeting of our cabinet. You are all powerful people. I believe that I don't need to say more to understand the importance. So no matter who it is, remember, France is above all else. Following Rufai's far-sighted speech, the audience burst into applause. Although the Prime Minister did not say any methods or measures, it is necessary to give priority to setting the tone. And Rufai looked at the cabinet members he selected with satisfaction. These people were basically in line with his preferences. Of course, many positions were given to support his own party, so he was basically satisfied. In the next meeting, they focused on the development of industrial production, people's livelihood projects, and other major domestic issues. The meeting lasted for more than 2 hours. After the meeting was over and everyone was getting ready to stand up, he spoke again. Foreign Minister Gambetta. Wait a moment. Rufai's words made Gambetta stop. The others were not fools, and knew that the two had important matters to discuss, so the entire conference room vacated after a while. After everyone else had left, Rufai spoke. Come and sit in my office, as you wish, Your Excellency Prime Minister. Faced with Rufai's invitation, Gambetta, as the foreign minister, would certainly not refuse. After the two arrived at the Prime Minister's office, Rufai picked up the phone and ordered to go down. Simon, let General Laurent come over. Jafel's words moved Gambetta's heart. He remembered what the Prime Minister said to him before. Is this what he wanted to do? Without letting Gambetta think too much, the door opened in less than 2 minutes, and General Laurent, the Minister of War, appeared in front of them, and this also confirmed Gambetta's thoughts. He didn't let him think too much. After the door was closed, Rufai immediately expressed his thoughts. You too, I hope to bring Tunisia under the protection of France next. Faced with the shocking words of His Excellency the Prime Minister, General Laurent, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gambetta and the Minister of War, still showed a somewhat surprised expression. The two of them were able to show surprised expressions, thanks to Rufai, who was the Prime Minister, giving them hints before this. They had thought about it, but they didn't expect it to happen so quickly. Facing the surprised expressions shown by the two people, Rufai, as the Prime Minister, saw it and was very satisfied with his method. Before he had just won the election, and before he ascended to the position of Prime Minister, he was already thinking about his future. He first needs to let France see the difference between himself and other Prime Ministers. Speaking of which, the Republican government has been in existence for 10 years, but there are countless people who have served as Prime Ministers. In the past 10 years alone, there have been 11 Prime Ministers. On average, there is one more Prime Minister every year. Frequent changes of Prime Ministers are not good for France. He came to power with one idea, and I came to power with another idea. This has also led to the French government often changing orders overnight, which will have a very bad impact on the French economy, diplomacy and other aspects. And Rufai is determined to change this situation. However, it is very difficult to change. Not to mention that he still lacks some qualifications. However, he already has some plans for this, and Tunisia is the breakthrough he is preparing for, so he is determined to win this. Since Tunisia is at stake, it is inevitable to make thorough preparations, the most important of which is not to let the Italians know. Speaking of which, Italy's operation in Tunisia will not be much later than France's attack on Algeria. When it was still the Kingdom of Sardinia, Italy started operations in Tunisia on the other side. Of course, this is nothing more than an individual or company's behavior. But then, the Kingdom of Sardinia took over and ended personally. Even though it was busy fighting the war to unify Italy at that time, it did not reduce its penetration into Tunisia. What makes Italy attach so much importance to Tunisia is not only the distance. Tunisia is less than 500 kilometers from Sicily, but also the fertile land of Tunisia. Tunisia only has a territory of more than 160,000 square kilometers, but its arable land reaches 9 million hectares, 90,000 square kilometers. This is an irresistible temptation for Italy, which has less land and more people. In addition, although this area belonged to the Ottoman Empire, it was only a vassal. Its people are mainly semi-nomadic and semi-cultivating, with a population of only more than 700,000, which is very suitable for Italian annexation. Therefore, Italy chose it as its first colony in Africa early on. However, Italy has a long way to go if it wants to conquer Tunisia, because to the west of Tunisia is Algeria, which belongs to France, and Tunisia is also favored by France. Italy had tried it as early as France's defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. An armed force was sent to take advantage of France's defeat and capture Tunisia first. However, the operation failed, and pressure from Britain and France made it abortive. In fact, just look at the map and you will know how wary Britain and France are about Italy occupying Tunisia. As long as Italy takes Tunisia, it can basically divide the Mediterranean into two halves, which is unacceptable to Britain and France. Of course it is not unacceptable, but Italy needs to pay a sufficient price. But now Italy still doesn't know this, or it can't come up with it. Of course, I have enough strength, so I can't accept it, but with Italy's size, I might as well forget it. After thinking about it. Therefore, Tunisia has been delayed in such an environment, and no one has yet taken it into their pocket. Of course, Ruffili now plans to make changes, and the reason that gives him the confidence is that France is stronger than Italy. And France also has the support of Britain and Germany. At the Berlin Conference in 1878, in order to mediate the dispute between France and Britain on the island of Cyprus, the two countries made France give up Cyprus on the condition that Britain supported France in seizing Tunisia. In addition, in Germany, Prime Minister Bismarck also supported this in order to divert France's attention. In addition, after Germany formed a defensive alliance with Austria, it further began to save the Three Emperors alliance of Germany, Austria, and Russia against France that had long existed in name only. Germany and Austria claimed that their alliance was only to prevent Russia's attack and had no additional ill will towards Russia. Therefore, they were willing to continue their rapprochement with Russia. As a result, Russia was first surprised and then relieved. It quickly made amity with Germany and Austria, and the Three Emperors alliance was resurrected for a while. At the same time, in order to appease France, Germany expressed its firm support for France's acquisition of Tunisia, which temporarily eased the contradiction between Germany and France. The iron-blooded Prime Minister is very resourceful. As for Italy's opinions, Italian representatives achieved nothing at the Berlin Conference, which represented the partition of Africa. The diplomatic consequences of not relying on France and being at odds with Austria were vividly demonstrated. Book friends who want to rob Congo, now you know why Italy can't do it. As the representative of Italy, Count Corti left Berlin in anger, completely unaware that his possessions had been traded. After that, Fagiuo has been preparing step by step to capture Tunisia. However, something happened last year that made France wary. That was Italy's purchase of the railway from Tunisia to Galata from the British. This greatly increased Italy's influence in Tunisia, which forced France to compete for Tunisia as soon as possible. Footsteps. The shit-stirring stick deserves its reputation. Under such circumstances, Ruffili really planned to take Tunisia first with a preemptive strike. Besides, due to its strength, France is not afraid of Italy at all, and it will be offended if it offends it. Faced with Jaffel's idea, Gambetta, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and General Laurent, the Minister of War, were a little surprised, but of course they were willing to do things that would bring sufficient benefits to France. Ruffili's plan was just a quick word, creating an established fact, and leaving Italy nowhere to vent. So after he expressed his thoughts, he specifically requested that they be kept confidential. The two ministers are not 3-year-old children, so they naturally know how to keep it secret. It is up to them to prepare separately. Chapter 25 Disappointment. Following Jaffel's secret order, the French began secret preparations. They first need the support of the UK, and now it is time for the UK to honor its commitments. As for Germany, they were quickly given the opportunity. Russian Tsar Alexander II was assassinated by Narodnaya Volya members. As a friendly country, France immediately sent its ministers to St. Petersburg, where they took the opportunity to secretly contact German Prime Minister Bismarck. Point of course, everything France did was done in secret, and Italy was completely unaware of it. So what is Italy doing? Sorry, Italy currently has a lot of things to deal with, and has no time to think about other directions. The first is that Italy is currently plagued by drought. Since last winter, rainfall has been scarce in southern Italy, which is unusually severe for Italy, which has a typical Mediterranean climate. You must know that the Mediterranean climate is rainy in winter and less rainy in summer. If there is little rain in winter, then don't expect it in summer. Therefore, in the face of the drought in the south, Carlo, as prime minister, is also overwhelmed. On the one hand, he needs to arrange manpower to deal with the drought, and on the other hand, he also needs to control the political situation in Rome. It can be said that he is too busy to touch the ground. Of course, he is also lucky that former Prime Minister Depretis did not make any small moves during this period, which allowed him to fully deal with other aspects. Of course, as a qualified politician, he will never leave his back to others, and the same is true for him. Currently, he is also keeping a close eye on the peaceful former prime minister. In addition to the former prime minister who is targeted by him, he can also understand the regent Duca Media and King Carlo, who can have an impact on the situation in Rome. It is precisely because of this that he can focus on disaster relief. Among the three people he closely monitored, former prime minister Depretis did not sit idly by and ignored the drought. He publicly stood up and called on everyone to raise money for the drought. So far, more than 1 million lire has been raised. As for the regent, it was rare for him to come out of Wenwen township and go to the south as a royal family. Of course, the problem was solved, and he gained a few more confident. As for Carlo, he didn't go to the south to do the show. Instead, he went to Marino every 2 days. It was obvious that he cherished the power research center. Your Majesty, you are here again. Looking at Carlo, who had just gotten off the carriage, Tesla complained helplessly. Ha ha ha, Nicholas, you are complaining again. Facing Tesla's words, Carlo smiled and replied. The conversation between the two made director Argus, who was supposed to be mainly responsible for reception, envious. But he just saw this envy, and he didn't have any inappropriate thoughts. After all, he and the king were not friends, so he was not qualified to talk like friends. And at present, Tesla is the only one in the research center who can be like a friend and talk to the king in front of him. By the way, since the opening of the electric power research center, Carlo, as the king, has come to Marino whenever he has time. Of course, it was fine before, but His Majesty still needs other influences, so he only comes once a week at most, but now he only comes once every 2 or 3 days. The reception standard of the research center also changed from being decorated with lights and decorations to welcome everyone, to just him and Tesla standing at the door. Of course, this is not because the research center wants to neglect him. It is taboo to neglect the funder, and the experienced director will not make this mistake. The main reason is that Carlo doesn't like to make things so grand and believes that the R/U0026D center should focus on research instead of cumbersome etiquette. If you want to repay him, then just produce the research results. Therefore, the two directors and deputy directors of the research center naturally followed the crowd and reduced the scale of the reception. Director Argus, is there any progress in research recently? As a well-educated figure in the political circle, Carlo certainly would not just talk to Tesla. He naturally gave the director the respect he deserved and asked about the research and development results. You come here every 2 days, and you are almost more familiar with us than we are. Of course, I can only comment on my own monarch and my heart, but I can't say it out loud, otherwise who knows what the consequences will be. Your Majesty, you also know that scientific research work is very boring, and it takes a long time to achieve results. At present, okay, I get it. You need to work harder to get results as soon as possible, so that the Italian people can see your contribution. Carlo dismissed the director in a few words, and then he and Tesla walked towards the ACK laboratory. Yes, what he is most looking forward to now is the commercial use of alternating current. However, although alternating current has been invented long ago, practical alternating current has not been used for a long time. The main problem is that the construction cost of AC power is more expensive than that of DC power, and the transmission loss is less than that of AC power. Of course, alternating current is not without its benefits. Its long distance and high efficiency power transmission has attracted the attention of many people. However, the current scale of electricity use does not allow this advantage of AC to be fully demonstrated. Of course, having said so much, there is another point, that is, the current AC motor power is not enough, and the electricity bill generated is relatively expensive. This aspect makes many people dislike AC power. Tesla's current main task is to develop a high-frequency alternator to reduce the cost of AC power. After all, it is still electricity, so why should others choose the more expensive one? Capitalists pursue profits and don't care about this. As long as it is practical and cheap, it is the best point. As soon as we entered the laboratory, we were filled with all kinds of motors. Whether they were on the market or not, you could find them. Many of them were bought from other people's laboratories. Many of the motors were still in pieces. Many people were watching next to them. Do research and take notes. These motors cost a lot of money, which shows Carlo's expectations for them. Of course, Tesla was not a fool. Seeing that Carlo attached so much importance to this, he certainly knew how heavy the burden was, so he pointed at the disassembled motors and said, "Your Majesty, we have currently studied various types of motors, which will greatly promote the research on high-frequency AC motors." Very good. Carlo looked at the busy people and praised him, then turned to Tesla beside him and said, "Although I don't want to rush it, I still hope that results will appear as soon as possible. Even if it's not an alternating current project, it can be something else." Yes, Carlo is a little anxious. Of course he knows that scientific research cannot be rushed, but now he is still a little anxious. "Your Majesty, I can understand your feelings, but science cannot be false in the slightest. I can't give you any guarantee," Tesla answered Carlo with a somewhat guilty look on his face. As a friend, of course he wants to help, but at present he dare not say when the research results will be produced. This thing is a bit metaphysical. Maybe there will be a major breakthrough tomorrow, but maybe there will be no progress for several years. Of course Carlo also knew this path, but he still couldn't help but be impatient. Maybe it was his teenage habits that made him impatient. After communicating with Tesla for a while, Carlo left with disappointment. Of course, he will not give up the laboratory, even if he can afford to fund the laboratory for 10 years, while Italy is busy. France has made diplomatic progress. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.